is a false god, a false god, a false god. Allah is a false god, a false god. Allah is a false god, a false god, a false god. Allah is a false god, a false god. And Muhammad is not a prophet. Muhammad is not a prophet. If you want grace and mercy and love, Islam is not for you. But Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus is the King of Kings who died to save us all. If you just repent and believe He took your sins on the cross, then mercy and grace, forgiveness and love, eternity can be yours. But Allah is a false god, a false god, a false god. Allah is a false god, a false god.
Hallelujah. Let Lord Jesus Christ shine forth. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us. Welcome to the live stream to have some fun. But Robert Spencer comes like so serious.
I have to sing now?
You don't have to sing.
I thought that was you.
Yeah, it's my favorite song. I was singing it last week when we were talking about the Quran. Allah is a false god, a false god, a false god. Allah is a false god, a false god. It's really catchy. It sticks with you even if you don't want it to.
Why do you put accent when you sing?
Well, she does.
No,
I'm just singing it the way she sings it.
That's my resurrected voice.
That's you singing like you're from London.
My resurrected voice.
East London.
Anyway, peace of Christ be with you, Robert Spencer, John Newton, Eric, and Al, and other guests. How are you doing, brothers and sisters?
Very good.
Thank
Very
God.
good. So, what I thought was we are going to do is just go through the highlights and lowlights of the year, since it's been 360 something days of 2024 and 2025 is starting in 2 days. I just thought we look back and then see how good our God is. What do you think? That's the plan, actually. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, things don't always look good sometimes from our perspective down here, but I'm looking forward to seeing in heaven and maybe catching some holy reruns and finding out that, hey, you know what? Things were working out a lot better than what I thought.
Good thing is we don't get to see what God plans. Okay, so your brother in Christ, where is your other half?
She is here. She's just not allowed to be on screen yet.
Okay.
She needs a dry erase board yet. I keep promising I would make that.
Is she not properly covered, brother?
No, I gotta get her gloves too.
Oh,
She shows her notes.
Whiteboard needs a whiteboard like Ali Dawa's wife.
She's right, Robert Spencer. I think Al just read Surah 3 and she noticed Allah's love towards blackened people. Therefore, she's using that.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go kind of with the structure, a little bit structure. Robert Spencer, would you like to go first? Or who would...
I don't remember anything. I'm sorry. I know there was a year. There must have been. It's December 30th, but I don't know what happened this year. I can tell you one thing. Okay, that's a good book.
Yeah, who wrote this book?
If I do say so myself, sorry. Anyway, the year that passed, there is a definite change that is happening. And John is absolutely right that from day to day, it can be difficult to see. But there's been a big change over the last year, and probably a little bit longer than that. that the Islamic apologists are not lying so much as they used to. They are granting points that they used to dispute. And so 20 years ago, I would say there's this problem with the marriage of Muhammad to Aisha and the excusing of pedophilia or justification for pedophilia as a result. And they would say, no, Aisha was 18. Aisha was not 9. You're an Islamophobe. You're ignorant. You're evil. Aisha was grown up. And now they say, oh, yes, of course. She was a child and we love marrying children and it's wonderful. And so this is, I think, as an indication that they are becoming more confident, that they think they're winning in the West, but it might end up blowing up in their faces because the more that they recognize, the more they acknowledge, rather, that what we've been saying all along was true, the more people wake up to what they're really all about. And they're not fooling so many people anymore because now they've shown themselves to be untrustworthy and that they were lying for all these years. So it's really very positive. And it's not just about Aisha. There are many areas where just in the last few years, and particularly in the last 12 months, I would say, there's been a real change in how they approach the non-Muslims in the United States and Europe. And we're getting more of the truth than we used to be.
I agree on how Muslims kind of now more open up about their sources, and then they just express, yeah, this is in our sources. I think your brother in Christ can contribute on this because yesterday we watched a Muslim missionary who says like he will do exactly the things Muhammad did. So I think acknowledging this is what Muhammad did was one step, and then now they are taking the next step, and then they say, I will do this as well. Muslims will do this as well. It's a bit dangerous, but yeah, that's kind of where they are now. They don't need us anymore.
I almost wondered what you're talking about, the Muslim cowboy.
Yeah, so there is this Muslim missionary called Muslim Cowboy. Your brother in Christ, do you want to unpack that? Because you brought up that video to our attention.
Yeah, so that was, what was it? The Next Soccer Night was the one who posted the question. And he was basically just asking, it was an open Q&A that the Muslim Cowboy was doing. He asked him, hey, would you be willing to do everything that Muhammad did?
Yikes.
And he said, yeah, with the caveat of things that were specifically for Muhammad only. So yeah, marrying an underage minor, no problem with it, all these things. And then, of course, the Next Soccer Night, being a bit of a smart butt about it, asked him about, would you walk around being covered in semen? The Muslim Cowboy said, no, Muhammad never did that. And of course, I pulled up all the references to that.
And he banned him for it.
He banned him for it. So, yeah, that would be the sum total. But yeah, they are admitting, yes, we would do this. You could also look at Kikachu, what he's been saying, him promoting what he's been promoting, trying to get it normalized. Yeah, so definitely seeing the same thing.
Not only
so Aga Abbas is a throwback to the old days. You really got to get with it, Aga. You're behind the times. All your leading Dawa guys, they're admitting it now. Aisha was 9, and it's in Bukhari multiple times. Come off it. You're not fooling anybody anymore. And your Dawa is outdated. Aren't you embarrassed?
No,
What is Allah going to say?
I think Aga is just trying to remind us that she was actually 6 when she got married. Maybe that's what Aga is trying to say.
Nice.
Thanks, Aggie.
There is a clip actually. I'll see if I can find it. Yasir Kadi was saying, "You just need to deal with it." Yeah, she's 6 years old. You got to deal with it.
That's it.
The question is, how are they going to deal with it?
Yeah,
I'm surprised that this Muslim cowboy was not visited by FBI or some kind of authority saying, we have you on record of intent
One of the funny
culture.
things that I think that we've seen is when AP wanted to have a debate with Daniel Hikikachu I think it was this year. It could have been late last year, but I think it was the very beginning of this year.
And almost
his response was like, no, because I don't want you and your little buddies to report me to the FBI again. And that kind of thing.
Wow. He's really scared about that.
Stupid things are definitely with criminal intent behind them.
He's really scared about that. He's brought that up to me several times, and even accused me of running to the FBI about him. And of course, the FBI is totally clueless on this issue and completely indifferent. And I've never reported him to the FBI, and they wouldn't care if I had, and they wouldn't do anything about it anyway. But it's interesting that he's so frightened of this possibility, and it suggests that he's up to some serious no good, which we will no doubt find out about eventually.
So I've got the clip of Yasir Kadim. I love to play this. Is that okay?
Sure.
It's your channel.
And all Muslims, don't apologize for the truth and don't distort the truth. There are Muslims that try to deny this. Oh, he didn't marry Aisha as a young girl. Ya akhi, look, that's not the way forward. We don't lie for the sake of our religion. Astaghfirullah. We have the truth. We're not going to cover up the truth if people find it embarrassing. This is the reality. Deal with it.
Whoa.
Okay,
what about
buddy.
Takia?
Yeah, that's what I was going to
That's
ask.
about what I say. That's the fundamental part of it, though.
I like this guy, though.
Well, Takia technically is when they're in real danger. And so this is, once again, this new honesty is an indication that they think they're out of a certain danger they might have been in a few years ago in the West, that they've established themselves here now. Nobody's worried about terrorism. The FBI is not looking at them. Nobody's bothering them. They can do dawah. They can spread Islam everywhere. And so they're more confident. They don't need Takia anymore.
And there are some people don't learn what is right and what is wrong. And in some part of the world, those people who never learned, they are passing the bills for kids to get married. Very dangerous, very dangerous. Okay. Anything else? Let's move to I'll come back to you, Robert Spencer. Let's move to you. You just remind
That's
us
okay.
very disturbing things. Like, not only I am okay when they say, yeah, this is in our Islamic sources. I am disturbed when they say it is our Islamic sources and we want to practice it.
Mm-hmm.
That's disturbing. L, sister, highlights of 2024, lowlights of 2024.
So highlights of 2024 would be God has continued to be so faithful and so good and so righteous amidst this disgusting religion of Islam. He has continued to show that he's the truth and that he is the way, and that he does not partake in that filth, and also has helped pull people out of it. He isn't someone that we've ever had to go, I wonder if he'll hear our prayers in the third part of the night or anything like that. He's always been with us through everything that's been hard. One moment though.
He's got a baby crying there. Is it not disturbing killing the babies in the Bible? Well, if you are Amalekites, dear Fazal, and I'm guessing that you are not Amalekites, so now shut up nicely. God does his judgment, and that was God's judgment for certain time, for certain people group, and that was for Amalekites. Since you are not Amalekites, and since we don't have Amalekites, and since we are not in 1400 BC to 1200 BC, 1000 BC, I think it is better for you to just keep quiet.
And also, that order was very limited to a time, place, and location.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like a, not like what we see in
And
the
the
Quran,
tribe.
the absolute order.
Yeah.
Time, place, location, and tribe.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very specific. Very, very specific.
To be fair, I don't see how Muslims can justify it before a baby has ever been able to deny Allah if, according to Islam, everyone's born a Muslim. But we obviously know that's not true either. So just something to think about, Muslims. Some inconsistencies.
You're asking too much to Muslims. I'll let that go. I'll let that go. You were sharing your highlights, sister.
So one of the things that has been very encouraging this year has been seeing the body of Christ growing together. More and more people have been stepping up to proclaim him in many different ways, using our different functions and the things that God has gifted us with in order to better spread him and share him with others. There's been lots of opportunities to specifically disciple people. I've seen several people come to Christ and really start to care about him and what his word says and how that should look in their lives. Specifically, getting to meet other people who have walked away from evil ideologies, renounced their sinful lifestyles, and come to Christ, and just hear their beautiful testimonies and see how God's working in them and encouraging them to continue to grow closer with him. It's been really incredible to just like kind of connect all of our different puzzle pieces together with more of the pieces of the puzzle. That's been awesome. One of the biggest things for me this year that I absolutely love is the Ohio Seek and Share Truth Conference. We got to do our second annual one of that. Lord willing, we have started planning for the next year. One of the things that I love about that is continuing to encourage and equip what I might refer to as like everyday Christians that maybe really do care about Christ, are attending church, want to reach out, but aren't really sure how, or don't really think that they have the knowledge that they need to go out and do what they've been commanded to do, encouraging them like, look, this is something that we can do and we can do it together. And, God will guide you and lead you, but we're happy to help in that too. And really seeing that people are starting to notice the importance and the need for evangelism, for apologetics, for polemics, because polemics for a very long time has been very poo-pooed. But even as of this year, we've very much seen that there is a new realization for the need for it, and that it's been welcomed with more open arms, at least by many. So that's been some of my big highlights that I've been very encouraged to see.
Do you have the dates for coming conference? You are going to do third one?
It will either be, Lord willing, mid to late June or the last week of July that bleeds into the first week of August.
Okay, so we keep eye on the dates you will share with us then.
Yeah, we will be publicizing that very soon, Lord willing.
Okay. Question, or can I get some comments on this?
This is a result of the Pope saying that Islam is peace and so on, and repeatedly saying that they can solve all the problems that are between Christians and Muslims with dialogue. And so Roman Catholics all around the world, they are taught that Islam is just another tradition and it's perfectly reasonable, and we should reach out and friendship and love and so on, which certainly we should be charitable to all people. But the idea that we just treat this as if it's any other, it's like having a Methodist teacher or a Baptist teacher in a Catholic school. It's completely different. But the people who run the schools where this is happening, I'm sure they're completely ignorant about that. And so the Muslims, of course, are taking advantage of that ignorance as always.
One of the things you get to see when Muslim teachers are working in Christian schools is especially when they take the kids to mosques. They make kids to kind of do the prayer, as well as they teach kids to recite Surah Fatiha. Very, very disturbing.
Yeah. And they don't know. They think that it's a prayer they can all agree on, because they don't have any idea that the people who have earned Allah's anger are the Jews, and the people who've gone astray are the Christians. So they think we can all get together and pray this. They do that in legislative bodies all over the world too. Get an imam, and he goes to the United States Senate or House of Representatives or some state house and prays Fatiha, and they have no idea what's being said, and they all join in, and it shows the hazards of being ignorant about these issues.
Definitely.
And in that, please pray for Church of England, just messed up and really, really needs Jesus. Really needs Jesus. Robert Spencer, Joshua, for your generosity. When is your book on anti-Semitism is coming out?
Coming out in March, and I know it's been a year since I wrote it now, but they just hold them forever. And there's one coming after that too. Watch for that one. But anyway, yeah, it'll be out in March. You can pre-order it now on Amazon. And will I narrate any future audiobooks? That's up to the audiobook company. I did one, The History of Jihad, and then I must have done such a good job, because every book after that, they got somebody else to do it. So, I don't know, but if they ask me, I'll do another one. We'll see.
I'm curious, who is your publisher, and who did you go through for the audiobook?
It's Bombardier Books, and the audiobooks, I don't even know who makes them. They deal with the publisher. And
Okay.
So I've had nothing to do with it. It's in the contract that the publisher takes care of all that. And so I got to do the one book, and it was a lot of fun, but haven't done any since then.
How many books have you written this year?
This year, 2. Only 2.
Only 2? How many books have you got altogether?
30.
Well, I'm done here.
Yeah, but yours are more science fiction. Yours are better. Because
I don't know, they're just made up.
That's real writing. Me, all I do is I open up the Quran and say, look what the Quran says, because people don't want to read it or they don't understand it. That's all.
That's good.
It's the easiest thing in the world. And
Well,
so,
it sounds like people need it, because if we're inviting them into our legislature and our schools, our Christian schools, we need to be aware of what's actually being said.
That's true. But those people in those legislatures, they know not to read Spencer. He's an Islamophobe, you know.
I thought you said that they do read the Quran, though. Isn't that your book, too?
The Quran, yeah, I wrote that. Yeah, I still have it over here. I know I should have done a better job. If I'd really written it, it would be better organized.
Oof.
And
that's one thing.
It makes sense, though, if you wrote it.
Yeah, it might even make sense.
Yeah.
I don't know. Allah knows.
Allah knows best.
Yes.
Your brother in Christ, highlights, lowlights of this year.
Well, I'd say one of the main highlights that I've seen this year has been what my wife was talking about, the shift I've seen in a lot of different churches from not so much being opposed, just being passive whenever it came to apologetics or polemics. And I've definitely seen this year that I've seen more churches become active in that regard, wanting to do it. And that's no small part to actually the audience who are pushing it in their churches, saying, hey, you guys need to pay attention to that. And I'd have to thank most of the people who are watching this now making that happen, because I know I'm not doing it all myself. So
yeah, that's good. I'm going to ask a question about taqiyya, which we don't use it. I want to ask about taqiyya. If it means prudence in circumstances for Muslims, how does it wind up Muslims lying to each other?
Well, that might just be lying. Taqiyya, It doesn't have to be taqiyya every time a Muslim's lying. He might just be lying. It's Arabs in particular. I'm sorry to sound racist, but they have a reputation. I didn't make it up. They have a reputation for lying all the time, and even non-Arab Muslims. It's just a cultural habit.
So what is the difference between taqiyya and lying then?
Well, taqiyya specifically is a Shiite thing, but the Sunnis do it also. They lie about it. They do taqiyya about it because they say it's a Shiite thing only, and you're making it into a big thing for all the Muslims. But actually, it's based on the Quran, and so it is for all the Muslims.
Isn't there 3 reasons for they're permitted to lie in that regard?
Yeah, you're helpless in the grip of. There's the hadith that Muhammad said that you can lie between a husband and a wife to keep the peace. The husband can lie to the wife, not the wife to the husband. And the wartime. And the other one is redundant. I think he says you keep the peace in the family twice. So the lying is specifically permitted in wartime, and that's the basis for all the taqiyya we see in the West nowadays, because they tend to think of themselves as being at war with the non-Muslims. But it becomes a cultural habit, and then the Muslims lie to each other, and it's taken for granted. Do you know Bosch Fawston? Bosch Fawston is an ex-Muslim. He's an Albanian, a blonde European who grew up a Muslim in the United States, and his family came over from Albania. And he left Islam, and he is the winner of our Muhammad cartoon contest back in 2015 when ISIS attacked the event. And anyway, Bosch says it's very interesting that he grew up a Muslim, but it was a very nominal Muslim family. They had the big Quran on a stand in the house, but nobody ever read it. And nobody went to mosque. They would go to mosque maybe once or twice a year, on the Eids, but that was it. And nobody knew anything about what Islam actually taught. But he said they all hated Jews, they all had contempt for women, and they all lied all the time. Wow. And these are just cultural things, he said, that are universal in Islamic communities. Whatever nationality, whatever ethnicity, it's just universal.
Interesting. That's one of the few things. Those are the few things that remain as a cultural. I don't know what would you call that, shadow of Islam.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that it's a funny thing. All over the Islamic world, there's a cultural overshadowing of Islam over everything. Do you know Robert Hussein Kambar Ali?
No.
He was a guy back in the 90s. He was in Kuwait, a Kuwaiti Muslim, and he converted to Christianity. And so he started to call himself Robert Hussein. His name was Hussein Kambar Ali. And he was immediately arrested in Kuwait and put on trial for apostasy. And so the funny thing about it was that Kuwait had the freedom of religion in its constitution. And so Robert Hussein said, "Why am I on trial? I have not broken any laws. What I have done is protected under the Kuwaiti constitution." And the judge said, the Kuwaiti constitution is under Sharia. And so you are on trial for apostasy based on Sharia, not based on the Kuwaiti constitution, which is secondary. And that's very common all through the Islamic world. You're going to get the hangover of Islam over everything that appears to be. So a lot of people say, well, Turkey is secular, and so they act as if there's no influence of Islam there. And of course, Turkey is rapidly re-Islamizing under Erdogan. But besides that, there's tremendous amount of Islam just in any general majority Muslim culture.
Turkey messed up very much.
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna.
Especially when you kicked me out.
We didn't.
Did you know Hatun kicked me out?
No, that's awful.
Yeah, it was terrible.
If we kicked him out, we give him option. Didn't we give you option?
To pay the jizya or what? Die or
Yep.
convert?
That was it. It was a beautiful choice.
You're lucky.
It was your
Yep.
very free will. You choose
There's
to.
no compulsion in religion.
Yeah. And yeah, don't like, just don't hurt the feelings of Turkish government. Okay. So this is coming from a hadith. I'll put the hadith on the screen. Where is it? I'll put this version.
Oh no.
No?
Who put this up?
Not my fault this time. That was Florida.
You did Florida. That's right.
I did in Florida to David on the stage. It was funny.
What? Remind me, what is it?
Oh, the leather strap of the eyes are the leather strap of the anus.
Yeah.
So I quoted this here and asked the pastor of the church that was hosting the
Conference. I don't know how many people were there. There was maybe 1,000.
700.
Yeah.
I asked him, how could we use the concept of the eyes from this hadith in reaching out to Muslims?
He took it
And I did
seriously.
it such a way
David
that I
knew
knew
what he
the
was talking
pastor
about.
wouldn't understand it, but I knew David would. So that led to a whole tirade, and that's on one of the shorts on my YouTube.
And it was live.
It was live, and there was. The pastor had a great sense of humor about it. He just rolled right along with it. Didn't bat an eye. Just I just read these things.
Okay.
That's it.
So the question is, what does this hadith means? Anyone wants to comment on it?
Pass.
Well, I think that's the problem with the strap. Yes.
Allah,
That's why
Allah
it's needed.
To my understanding, basically, you have a good chance of crapping yourself during nighttime.
At least passing gas.
Passing gas.
The leather strap was the way that you close your water jug, your skin, whatever it is you're holding the water in, and you have a leather strap around it. And so you take some water and then you tighten the leather strap so the water doesn't spill out. And so if your eyes are closed, then you're not going to have control over the anus. This is completely ridiculous, but that's the idea here. And so you have to perform ablutions when you wake up in the morning, because otherwise you're going to be impure from the night.
We need to edit that part out and put it up on YouTube. Because you not only like you explained it, but you kind of, without like any giggling or anything, you unpack this very serious hadith for us.
It's a
Yeah, it's very important.
Yeah,
It's very-
everyone is enlightened, and that should be on internet.
Well, there's so many very important hadiths, and this is one, because if you go around in a state of impurity, you're going to end up in hell. And it's the same thing, if your clothes are too long, if you're not wearing high water pants, you're going to end up in hell, because Muhammad says that the end of the garment that trails on the ground is trailing into hellfire. And so you got to know this stuff, or you're going to burn.
Obviously, the New Testament is corrupted because it doesn't have those warnings.
Exactly.
Mr. Essentials. So I saw someone a brother who commented on how Muslims are working in Christian school, wants to come into the live stream. You are very welcome to do so. The way it can work out, if you be kind enough and then drop email to hatun@dcciministries.com, I'll send you the link and then you just jump into the stream. So we are even though Robert Spencer coming with sweet and very serious response to the question, like it is pretty informal time. Let me copy that. Okay. So Al shared her highlights. Your brother in Christ shared his highlights. John, did you share your highlights?
No, but your timing is pretty good because I'm going to be releasing a video later this evening talking about these things. And there are 6. I mentioned them last night on that other video. 6 things where 2024 can be described as the year of Christian cultural renaissance to an extent. I mean, you can stretch a little bit. But we are seeing a bit of a shift. And this kind of shift that's happened is like in the early 2000s with Amazon starting to take over the publishing industry. It was so difficult to get anything published for the longest time. There's all sorts of hoops you'd have to follow through. And you have gatekeepers there that were literary agents that would pretty much be English majors in college that couldn't find a job anyplace else. So they became literary agents, and they were pretty much all left-leaning. So they would say things like, oh, I woke up today and I feel like I want a story with a strong female protagonist and diverse characters. And that has been the siren call for the last decade or more. And so what's happened is people say, I can't get through. There's these barricades that are there. And so independent publishing came through. You could get, and unfortunately, there's a lot of junk that could also spill onto KDP and other sources. So this has opened up the floodhouse for alternative books and authors to be able to come in. The same thing has happened recently for the movie industry. If you look at what's happening with Hollywood, most of what they're coming out with are reboots, reruns, or sequels of existing IP. They're not taking any chances. So now you have studios like Angel Studios, 5 and 2, and even and others that are popping up and producing content. Not all of it good, but some of it actually pretty good and much lower budget than you would see coming out of Hollywood. And now we can start getting messages across where authorities on the left side or the left coast would say, no, you can't. So that's been a good thing. Christian cultural renaissance. And we're going to be talking tonight on the video. I have 6 different things in regards to that I'm going to be talking about.
What time is the video going to go up?
8 p.m. if I can finish it on time. So I'm racing against the clock, but it should come out one way or the other. So
okay, we keep eye on that. Any other highlights any of you wants to mention? No?
One of the things that I would say we don't talk about much anymore, but definitely our family. Our family has continued to grow and grow towards God. We now have 4 littles, and it's been incredible to see them pursuing God and genuinely caring, genuinely praying when no one's around or when they think no one's around. Definitely even bringing up to us the thought of prayer. I still remember there was one time that this year that I was like frustrated about a situation, and I told one of my sons, and his first response was, let's pray. And it was like, just like those moments that are like, oh God, like, why wasn't that my first thought? But I'm so grateful that that was his first thought. And like, just continuing to get to grow in my relationship with God as I'm trying to guide them, and as we're trying to guide them in their relationships with God. And it's both a highlight and a lowlight at times, because the lowlight of it is like, man, like I see how like broken and a sinner I am when I am not like putting my full faith in Christ. And obviously like I want to and I'm trying to, but like, so trying to guide other littles to go towards Christ and figuring out how to do that together. But it's such a blessing seeing how God loves us, even when we stumble, even when we do dumb things. And it's like, because as a parent, a lot of times you're like, oh, just do the thing. Like, why can't you just do the thing? And it's like, oh, sorry, God. Or like, why are you complaining about this? Oh, sorry, God. Like, it's been an incredible journey, and I'm grateful to continue to go on it. there have been so many times too, as far as like physical ailments, where there's been pretty serious hurdles that we've had to jump this year. Earlier this year, for example, when we found out that we were expecting our fourth, there were some complications at the beginning, and just like really wrestling with God with those things, but then also seeing how he really comes through, and ultimately knowing like no matter what he chooses to do, we know that his will is best. And sometimes that's really hard because we don't know what his will is, but also knowing that like his plans are so much better than anything that we could have ever expected. And so that's been really beautiful to continue to see this year and every year.
Yes, thank you. That great reminder and encouragement that we've got very good God, very, very good God.
Amen.
Lowlights.
I got one. Not
Lowlights.
really terribly low, but it is like a disappointment that it didn't do better than what it was supposed to do. At least what I would have expected. Now, it was in the email I sent you. Did you get that?
We've already established Hatun does not read her email.
I know.
Asking.
Yesterday with Truth Defenders.
Robert Spencer, she was telling us about how wonderful you are with emails, though. So she was like really showing that you're a wonderful person despite her failures. But
because I answer email, that's a low bar.
No,
so I appreciate it, but that's maybe my only redeeming quality.
Oh no,
Robert Spencer.
It's going to be on my tombstone. Answered emails.
Not anymore.
So
No.
just
Autoresponder.
take yourself out of the picture, okay?
Yes.
I send email to anyone, and how many times I needed to send? I need to send emails to them to remind. I send them emails. They need to reply. And yesterday, I had 573 or something email, which I needed to like read and reply. And then a brother comes into live stream, send me email like 6 minutes. 6 minutes in advance, 6 minutes like before he came to the live stream, and he's complaining that I didn't reply his email. And I was like, I wanted everyone to know in that, because someone was talking about your skills, and then I wanted to remind everyone that actually you are the only person in my mailing list. I never needed to send second email to remind anything. Or I didn't even need to wait for following day for email to be answered.
Well, then I've done some good in the world.
People are really bad, like with the emails, like really bad.
I think it's all moved to text now, or WhatsApp, or Signal.
Yeah, if that's what you are gonna do, don't send email at the first place.
Oh yeah.
Like they send the email and then you reply their email, then that email needs to be replied. It never comes back. Those kind of things. But anyway, yes, it's good I want to bring everyone's attention. In this circle, 5 of us, you will never need to ask Robert Spencer to reply your emails.
No pressure now.
Yeah. Trouble.
I see I have 41,659 unread emails, so
You are joking.
I better get on that.
You're joking, right? Are they like...
No, I would show you. I don't know how to show you, but...
Don't show your emails to people.
No, just the thing that says 41,659. You know, the
like you didn't read them?
yeah, that's right. I get so much nonsense, you know.
But how can you know it's nonsense if you haven't even opened them?
Well, it's from people I don't know, or people I didn't ask to write me. See,
your case is falling apart.
That is 49 minutes 16 seconds of this live stream. I will figure out the ways to delete that section.
Yikes. I didn't name any names.
Yeah, but you just like you made me. I need to think again now. Okay, so
Yeah.
you don't reply the emails that you don't know who they are.
Yeah, that's generally true. And a lot of times people ask me to do things, and I love them, but I don't. I have enough to do as it is, and they say, "Can you find this article that said this that I read in 2013?" And I can't find it, and I think I'm sorry, I don't have time to do that kind of thing. I feel terrible, but it's just not possible. So what are you going to do? You know. So I just generally don't answer at all.
But you
Because if you say I'm not going to do it, then they think, "Oh, you're so important, you can't do this simple task." Oh, Mr. High and Mighty. Oh, and so who needs it? It's better just to be quiet.
okay, but you read that email. So
That one
that's
I
not
read.
one of that 41,000 emails, right?
You're right. You're right. A lot of the 41,000, it's after a while you get to recognize the names and you see. Like there's this guy. He wrote me. It's probably been a couple of years, and he asked me some questions and I answered, and he didn't like the answer and he started arguing, and then and I was going to answer him again, but then before I could do that, he sent me his follow-up about 15 times, and I thought, oh, he's just a spammer. So I put him on the spam list, and he keeps it up. He sends me 5 or 10 emails a day, every day for a couple of years. And then there was the guy in Pakistan sending me, the beheading pictures. He would take my publicity picture where and put blood all over the neck, and I think if I look that happy when I'm beheaded, I'll be ahead. But anyway, literally, and he was writing every day for a year or so, but he stopped now. I don't know what he's up to. Maybe he's on his way here.
Maybe someone dealt with his head.
I don't know. He works for the government of Pakistan. I put his Facebook page up, the link to his Facebook page up on Twitter, and said, "Why hasn't this man been arrested?" Because he was sending me death threats every day, and he got all upset about that and said, "How dare you violate my privacy and put?"
Oh, that is impolite.
Yes, it was so rude. And meanwhile, I've got like 100 images this guy made of me being beheaded or in the flames of hell or all these different things.
That was not private at all.
Smiling happily all the while, but
maybe someone needs to check if he fly to USA recently.
Yeah, that's the problem. Is the Biden administration would probably let him in and say, "This is where he lives. Here's his address," but he hasn't gotten here yet.
No, you've got to watch out for that.
Okay. You never know.
We have the brother who dropped the message of that he works in a Catholic school and they've got Muslim teachers. Peace of Christ be with you, brother. Maybe we don't have the brother.
I'm not sure he's aware he's
Or not.
online.
All right.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know if he realizes he is
Hello?
live.
Okay, I'll put him down until we figure out what's happening there. Let's try that again. Sound check.
Ah,
Hi.
hello.
How are you doing, sir?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
No.
we can hear you. How are you doing? I am assuming
I'm
you
on
can.
the show. Everyone can see and hear you. Hatun, can you hear me? Thank you so much for bringing me on board.
That's okay. Welcome. So, what do you have for us?
What do I have for you? First of all, I want to wish you all a very, very happy Christmas
Thank you.
and all good things for 2025. And I'm good. I can hear an echo coming back.
Yes, that echo is coming from your side. That's okay. That's okay. You can hear.
Can you hear me? Should I turn off the? Should I turn off the?
Okay, you need to turn off the YouTube.
I'm sorry, I think I've still got the YouTube playing. Should I shut the YouTube down?
Yes, please. If you can close down the YouTube
Okay.
and we can hear you. So,
Okay. First of all, sincere greetings for Christmas and the coming year. I want to say a very sincere greeting to Robert Spencer. I've been persevering with his book on the Quran. I'm a Catholic priest in South London. Hatun, I've spoken to you previously, but it's probably 2 or 3 years ago now. And I just want to applaud you all, and I want you all to stay in safety and peace. I had an interesting experience this year because I was invited to speak at the Garrison Church in Woolwich, close to where this young Fusilier Lee Rigby was murdered 4 or 5 years ago. And I made an exposition of the verse in the Quran that concerns, I can't remember, the certain servant of God, or certain servant of Allah, who is intermixed with Al-Qadir. And it was quite controversial at the time, but it was very sad that we had this big multi-faith act of witness of solidarity and unity at the ruins of the Garrison Church in Woolwich in South London, less than half a mile from where Lee Rigby was murdered. And all the faith communities were there, the Salvation Army, the different evangelical Christian churches, the Catholic Church, the Jewish people were there, the Hindus were there. I can't remember who else, who am I? The Sikhs were there. But significantly, one community was missing. And that was the very community that needed to be there because we need reconciliation because of the murder of Fusilier Lee Rigby. And it was distressing to think that all the different faith communities came together in the wake of that terrible thing, except for one. Now, it's difficult for me to see you all without the YouTube being present at the moment. But I just want to encourage you all. And I'm conscious that both at Speaker's Corner, that little by little, I think the confidence of the so-called Islamic witness is diminishing. In fact, I would even say it's collapsing because they have no answers. They have no answers to the historic verification of Muhammad. They have no satisfactory answer to the historic verification for Mecca. They have no mechanism for allowing for a critical investigation of the Quran or any of the traditions. And I was formed originally as an Anglican priest. I'm a Catholic priest now, but I was originally formed in a very critical tradition for the Anglican faith. And we were taught to look at our historical texts and traditions in a very critical way. And I pride that in my identity now as a Catholic priest. But under the current changing contemporary dispensation for investigations into Islam, is it going to be that we cannot now? Are we forbidden from applying any kind of critical mechanism to the historical traditions and the theological dimensions of the Quran? Is that going to be Islamophobic? Because Christianity has stood up for 250 years to a historical critical investigation, and it stood up to that process. It gets battered along the way, but nevertheless, it has stood up to that process, and Islam needs to be subject to the same critical process of investigation. But
Amen.
if we're now going to be considered to be Islamophobic for applying the same standards to Islam as what we've applied to Christianity for 250 years, what is the future going to be? I don't even know if you can hear me at the moment. So,
Oh, yes.
tell me if you can hear me.
yes, we can hear you.
Thank you.
Who would like to make a comment on the comments and questions are being posed?
Okay, give it a shot. First, I'd say for the memorial service that was given, if Islam is really a religion of peace, the first thing that they would have done is to come back and say, we're very sorry this had happened. Condolences to the family and to the community. This is not something that should happen under Islam. We don't condone this, and then give the usual speech that they would give when they're 2% of the population. But it doesn't sound like they even extended that
No.
to the rest of her.
No, and there is a very, very large Islamic, they call it a cultural centre, don't they? Why is it that in the UK mosques are not called mosques? They're called Islamic centres, aren't they? There's a
It's
huge
the same
mosque.
thing. It's the same thing in the US, and it's a purposeful thing in the first place to make people not realize that it's a mosque, because they think that a mosque is more threatening, but also because in the Muslim Brotherhood's document about its strategy in the West that was captured from the Holy Land Foundation trial. The Holy Land Foundation was the biggest Islamic charity in the United States, and it was shut down in 2007 for funding Hamas. And when the FBI raided their offices, they found this document, an explanatory memorandum for the Muslim Brotherhood in the US. And they said the mosque is the center for dawah, for jihad, for all the aspects of spreading Islam. And so they elaborate on that at length. So it's not just a mosque, it's a center for operations for the takeover of the entire country. This is being stated, in other words, right under our noses, and people don't understand the implications.
Robert Spencer, would you be kind enough to also comment on the historical reliability of Islam and how including Muslim missionaries are intentionally running away to kind of dig into history of Islam?
Yeah, there's nothing about the history of Islam. You know, I wrote a book, The History of Jihad, a few years ago, because the Islamic apologists only, and even the people who oppose the Islamic apologists, the Christians and others who deal with the Islamic apologists, they deal with Quran and they deal with the life of Muhammad, but they don't deal with 1400 years of history. And the Dawah forces are not equipped. They don't know the history any more than the Westerners do. And so the history of jihad is a rich vein to study for learning about how the Quran has been understood throughout history, how it's been applied, which explodes a lot of the claims of the Islamic apologists and so on. And Father, you're absolutely right. Christianity has been subjected to historical criticism for over 200 years and has survived it and is stronger for it. And in Islam, everybody's afraid. I saw recently there was a discussion of the textual problems in the Bible and the Quran. This was online. And for the Bible, they had Bart Ehrman, who's a well-known critic of Christianity, who denies the historicity of Jesus. I don't think he denies that Jesus existed, but he claims the Gospels are not reliable. And he's talking about the textual problems in the Bible, but for the textual problems in the Quran, they had an Islamic apologist. And the academic establishment is completely afraid to speak about the historical problems in Islam. And that's why the work of Jay Smith is so courageous and pioneering in laying bare how weak the foundations are for the historicity of Muhammad. And this is also very important for dealing with the Islamic apologists, because as you noted, Father, they have no comeback. They don't know how to deal with this. They never heard it.
I take my hat off to Jay Smith and also to Al-Fadi, because we're at a point now where it's almost all been said and there's not been any reply.
Yes.
But God bless Jay Smith. He's of a different tradition than I am as a Catholic myself. But I take my hat off to him because he's keeping it fresh and out there and in the public domain, and there is still no reply. There is no reply. And I respect him for that, and I take my hat off to him, and he will go down in history. So,
yes.
Okay, let me just jump in and say hi to Jay Smith. Peace of Christ be with you, Jay. How are you?
Good to be here. I see you got some good people on board. I'm not sure if this gentleman that just spoke, Basil, get, but thank you for your accolades. If you're a Catholic, then you're on board with us. Almost everybody I'm
Yeah, absolutely.
I have 7 researchers. 5 of them are Catholics.
Yeah, sure.
I couldn't do without the Catholics because you guys get it quicker than the Protestants do. You understand it better, and you've done an awful lot better. Stop the coughing. Stop the coughing.
Just don't
This
tell
is what I
Pope
get
Frank.
from my Protestant brothers
Get us some
and
medication.
sisters. I have to go to the Catholics because I get this kind of reaction from many of the Protestants.
Yeah.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to take off. I love you all, but I've already stayed longer than expected, and I'm being
Myself too.
summoned.
Hatton, I
so-
just wanted to say thank you for bringing me on board, and I
That's
would
okay.
love to speak to you again. I have to look after my 99-year-old father, which you can see behind me, and we thought he wasn't going to make Christmas, but I'm going to have to put him to bed. But I'm really touched to speak to you. I'm especially touched to speak to Robert Spencer and to Jay Smith and to all of you. And I just want to say God bless, good
Thank you.
luck for 2025, and let's all stay in unity in the Christian faith. God bless you all.
Thank you
gonna
very
leave
much. You all.
now.
Brother.
bless
Bye.
God bless you guys.
Bye.
Thank you very much to
God
Rob
bless.
Spencer for joining us too. I was gonna say, but he already left.
I don't know how to-
Remove. Okay. How are you doing, Jay?
Well, pretty good. Thank you. Who is this fellow, this Basil Gate? I don't know him.
Well, you just jumped in and then you made my most serious guest to leave. That's just so heartbreaking. That the brother was in the joining us in the chat. He's a Catholic priest. Apparently, he expressed that his concerns regarding how in Catholic schools as well as in Church of England, Muslim teachers are there to like working as a teacher to teach the religion stuff. He was commenting on that, and then he wanted to join the stream to talk about it, and then he shared a couple of his experiences.
Okay, good. Nice to meet you, John and Eric and Elle. Good
Nice
to
meet
see
you.
You met Eric and Al before, right?
I have, yes. Yeah. We met not in Ohio. I think it was in Dearborn, or is it
Yes.
Okay, and it's first time you are meeting with John?
John? I don't know John. I know the John Newton. Is it one?
No, not related. Maybe distantly, but Amazing Grace, no, not quite the same.
Jay, we are talking about highlights of 2024.
Okay, yeah. I assume you want me to talk about some highlights that we are having. Well, some of it feeds right into what we've just been talking about. Robert Spencer has done probably better than anybody else to bring in the whole historical critique with his book that he introduced in 2012, Did Muhammad Exist?, which became a #1 bestseller, revised in 2021. So it's been out there 3 years. And it's this book that probably has done more damage alongside, as far as on a popular level, not on an academic level, the material that's come out from Dr. Patricia Corona, Dr. Michael Cook, people like that, and certainly the German school is probably more devastating. But it's held in academia. And the difficulty for us here on the internet is taking that academic material and bringing it down to layman's terminology so that people can understand it. That's our job. That is Robert Spencer's job. That's my job. Al-Fadi, those of us who are confronting this, Chris from Speaker's Corner is doing an amazing job of actually taking it down to Speaker's Corner and applying it there and finding that the Muslims are running away. They are, as Robert is saying, they don't know what to do with this, because I'm not sure I would know what to do with this. If everything we know about Christianity the demand has been, as you quoted just about five or 10 minutes ago, the demand on Christianity has always been that we prove from evidence that there was a man named Jesus, that he did receive, not that he received a revelation, but that he himself was the revelation, and that those who then took what he said and what he did and wrote it in the gospel accounts, and others who wrote it in the letters that like Paul wrote later on, that those letters existed, that gospel account existed, that person Jesus existed, that he died and he rose again. Those are the things we've had to prove in the last 200 years, and we've done that. We've taken on this redacted criticism and what we call form criticism and source criticism and all these criticisms that have been foisted against Jesus Christ and against the early church, and certainly against our scriptures. And we, in the last 100 years, we have been able to respond to every one of them. In fact, in many cases, we have enlarged those criticisms, taken it much further than even the critics were asking us. And we've done that because we took those criticisms seriously. Now, every religion that claims to have historical claims, and every religion does make historical claims, not just Christianity and Islam, so does Hinduism, so does Buddhism. They all make historical claims about people who live at certain places doing certain things at certain times. Those are historical claims. Anytime you make a historical claim, you're going to have to support it. And that's all we're demanding. It was demanded of us. We're now demanding it of Islam. Islam has never been held to those type of claims. The example that Robert Spencer just gave of this symposium, where they brought one of the greatest critics of Christianity to destroy and try to shut down and try to confront the historicity of Christianity. And when they turned to Islam, they brought in an apologist for Islam. That's symptomatic of the academic world today. They don't want to ask these questions of Islam. And they're not doing Islam a favor by not asking them. Because if you don't ask them, that Islam gets off the hook, and sooner or later, we're going to come around and we're going to shut them down, and it's going to be done much more publicly. And it's going to be not only an embarrassment, it's going to cause a huge exodus out of Islam. Because if you don't have a man or a book or even a place, something as simple as a place called Mecca from the 7th century, those three, take out any one of those three, you shut down Islam. So that's why, in ways, this has been 2024 has been a banner year. Why? Because we found two new discoveries in 2024 that we didn't know in 2023. And one was its earliest, what we know as the earliest traditional manuscripts. We have finally gone and looked and seen what the dates are. No one's bothered to ask this question. We've all been asking the question of the Quran, and we spent so much time on the Quran that we've not bothered to say, well, what about this man named Muhammad? What about everything we know about this man named Muhammad? Let's look at his biography, known as the Sirah. Let's look at his sayings, known as the Hadith. Let's look at how the commentaries on the Quran, known as the Tafsir, and let's look at the history of early Islam, known as the Tahqiq. Those four genres. Let's ask the same questions we've asked of the Quran, and then let's ask them of these four traditions. No one's dared to do that. Nowhere. Not even in academia have they done that. And so we decided to do that. And you know who, I can't give his name, the man who has been the primary researcher on that, Dr. Pat Andrews, that's not his real name, has spent the last 2 years working just on this subject. And we finally were able to introduce it. I think I introduced it on your channel first, didn't I, Hatun, back in the summertime?
Yeah, we talked about
it there. And then I had to leave. I had to go to Africa. I had to go for 3 weeks to Nigeria. I went to seminary after seminary in Nigeria. They wanted it. And then I had to go to Ethiopia, to Addis Ababa, to the Makele Yesus seminary, the largest one in Ethiopia, and introduce it there. They wanted it. And I really want the Africans to have it before everybody else, because they're in a battle, much greater battle than we are. It's a battle of survival. If Islam continues to encroach and enlarge in Nigeria as it is right now, keeping on the same pace they're going, it's going to be an Islamic country. If Nigeria goes to Islam, so does Africa. And the same way with Ethiopia. It's the only country that's retained its Christian identity for 2,000 years. From the very beginning, it's been a Christian country. It's still just barely a majority Christian country, but now they're surrounded by Islam on all four sides, and they are losing the battle. So they need this. And the largest seminary said, could you introduce this for our seminarians? So I did that about 3 weeks ago. Now, what has happened is that's been the major, what we're finding is almost every one of the earliest traditional sources. So the sources for Al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, Ibn Dawud, Tirmidhi, Majah, Nisai, also for Ibn Hisham or Al-Waqidi, also for Al-Tabari. Those are the major sources. I'm giving you 9 of them. They are the Sirah, the Tafsir, the Hadith, and the Tahqiq. Those are the earliest sources that Islam claims for those 4 genres, those 9 fellows. Every one of them, we have always said, and Hatun, I've said this on your channel many times, that they are writing this down in the 9th and 10th century, and we've always assumed that that was true. Why shouldn't we ever query that? That's no one's ever bothered to ask the question that was asked of us back in the 18th century, and that is, where are your evidence? Where is your manuscripts? Where are your manuscripts for Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and for the letters of Paul? A perfectly legitimate question to ask. We didn't have anything that from the 1st century, nor does Islam have from the 9th and 10th century. There are no manuscripts at all. For Ibn Hisham, Al-Waqidi, for Ibn Al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, Ibn Dawud, Tirmidhi, Al-Najai, Nasai, and Majah. Nothing at all for anything from Al-Tabari. Not one piece of evidence. Not one paper at all. Not one even inscription from the 9th and 10th century. And certainly not from Iraq, where they were all supposed to have been written. So that was a curiosity, and we needed to find out why. And it was the Germans that helped me out. Dr. Robert Kerr, you know Dr. Robert Kerr. I don't know if you've had him on your channel, Hatun, but Dr. Robert Kerr has been a real gem for us, and he has really done an awful lot of job helping both Pat Andrews and myself. And he said, well, the reason why is you need to look and see where the existing manuscripts that introduce this material. So start with the Sirah. Let's start with the biography of Muhammad. It supposedly is the earliest. Ibn Hisham, 833, 9th century. That's what we've been told. Al-Waqidi, 835. That's what we've been told. So that's early 9th century, though Muhammad died in the early 7th century. Bad enough that it's 200 years. He says, and Dr. Robert Kerr said, okay, who do you think actually wrote it? What is the Sirah that you read in your school? The Sirah that I had grown up with. Alfred Guillaume's Sirah. That's the Sirah that anybody has to read. If you want to read about Muhammad's life, you've got to go to Alfred Guillaume. Alfred Guillaume is a Frenchman, but we know that he's not the one that wrote it. But you need to open up and just look at the introduction. And he says very clearly that this comes from although he claims it is Ibn Hisham. He does make sure that he says this is written by Ibn Hisham, not Ibn Ishaq from the 8th century. This is written by Ibn Hisham. He then says, however, it is attributed to Ibn Ishaq. But that's as far as he goes. And Dr. Robert Kerr said to me, who do you think, if that was so, then obviously Alfred Guillaume must have been looking at some manuscripts that Ibn Hisham had written. And I said, yeah, didn't he? I said, no. There is no one named Ibn Hisham who's written any manuscript. We're not even sure there's a person named Ibn Hisham. We've been told by the traditions that he was born in Basra, that he grew up in Cairo, and that he did all his work in Baghdad, in what is today Iraq. That's what we've been told. But show me any manuscript. Well, then where did Guillaume get his manuscript from? So let me ask you, Hatun, do you know where Guillaume got his manuscript from?
We talked about it, and then we come to the conclusion it has nothing to do with anything from 7th century, 8th century, 9th century, and then onwards, right?
So who was the person that Alfred Guillaume went to get his manuscript, to get his story, to get the story that we're all reading today? Do you know, John?
No.
Or Eric? Or El?
No, I can tell you a little bit about the New Testament, but not. This is fascinating because all these accusations come toward Christians from Muslims to say, you don't have the New Testament until Council of Nicaea or whatever. And now this is much better.
Yeah, which John was it?
Which John? John the Baptist.
Was it John the Baptist? Was it this John? Was it that John?
I'm gonna Jay, I'm gonna bring up your question. Are you listening, Jay?
I am. Go ahead.
I'm gonna bring you up question. I apologize that I didn't bring up this question to Robert Spencer because I was just dealing with other things. I didn't see it. So therefore, I'm asking you. I think do you hold the position that Muhammad didn't exist, Jay?
Yeah, I take that position very clearly, and I supported Robert Spencer.
Just checking. So if he didn't exist, how can Sunnis and Shiites be explained? They believe the same myth, but seems a little bit adversarial.
Sunni and Shiites have no difficulty because anybody that's a Muslim that is from the 9th and 10th century, because the whole Sunni Shiite divide did not even begin until about the 11th century. It's all attributed and redacted back to a problem that existed in the 7th century. But there's no reference anywhere to people called Sunnis or Shiites from the 7th century at all. There is no reference to anybody called Muslims from the 7th century. Put that under your hat. So this is not something that happened in a place called Karbala or a place that was because of the Battle of Siffin. There's no Battle of Siffin that we can find in any documentation from the 7th century. Everything that we know about the whole Sunni Shiite split has to do with inheritance. It's a political problem. It's not a theological problem. And it all has to do who carries the mantle of this man named Muhammad. The difficulty is that no one at that time even knew of a mantle named Muhammad, because there's no man named Muhammad. And from the place, from what we can know as the Hijaz, the central part of Arabia, from any of that area, we don't have any reference to anybody named Muhammad. Notice I'm emphasizing the vowels Muhammad at all from the 7th century. We have lots of references to people called Mahmud. If you take the 3 vowels out and you're left with the 4 consonants, there's lots of references to Mahmud. Mahmud's everywhere.
And
But
couple of other
Muhammad
options.
is not a Muslim, and he's not even an Arab.
So a couple of other options would come as well. In that case, the question, answer to the question which was posed, how do you explain the differences, division between Sunnis and Shiites? If you think about, they hold a different biography of Muhammad. They hold different customs of Muhammad. So how do you put that together with your findings? Like,
Very simple. If you're talking about inheritance, if you're talking about authority, and this, what we're talking about is political authority, then you will always need to ask, when did this begin? When was this happening? And this all began during the Abbasid period. It's the Abbasid that had a problem between the Persians and the Arabs. The Persians believed that anybody that came in the line of Muhammad from his direct line, his direct lineage, should be the caliph. Whereas the Sunnis then said, no, anybody who's part of the ulama, which would be the religious authorities, could be chosen. So it didn't matter that you come from his line or not. That's all it is. The Sunni Shiite divide has nothing to do with theology, has nothing to do with Muhammad per se. It has to do with who takes the mantle of Muhammad. And this is a problem that came when Islam then moved its headquarters from Damascus down to what is today Iraq, down to what is today Baghdad. Then it became a real problem because that's the Persian area, whereas the earlier area is Arab. But isn't it interesting? The Arab that we're talking about, the Umayyads, who are Arab, are not from Medina. They're not from Mecca. They're from Damascus. Why has anybody asked that question? They're 1,200 miles too far north. See, these are the questions we should be asking rather than why is it, where this divide come from? This divide had nothing to do with the 7th century. The divide had to do with the 9th, 10th, and 11th century when you had a political problem as to who was to be an authority. But let's get back to what we were talking about. And that is, even if you want to believe that there was a man named Muhammad, you've got to have someone who was there, who was around him, who actually saw him and heard what he said and saw what he did. Like we have with Matthew and John. We have 2 eyewitnesses that write what he said and what he did. And then we have 2 that get it from the eyewitnesses. That would be the 2nd generation. The equivalent in Islam would be the Sahaba and the Tabi'un. The Sahaba are those who were right there with Muhammad, watching what he did and hearing what he said. And the Tabi'un are those who got it they're the 2nd generation, who then got it from the 1st generation, and then they wrote down what he said and what he did. And these are people like Muwatta ibn Malik. These are people like Munabi and Hanbal and Razak and Tawilisi and Shaiba. Those are what they claim are the Sahaba and the Tabi'un. Now, have any of you ever seen anything written by those guys that are from the 7th century? Do you know of any material that's written by those fellows? Not one. No. Why has no one even asked when they lived? Because take a look when they lived. Well, the first one is Malik. He lived in the 9th century. Munabi lived in the 12th century. The other is Hanbal, Razak, and Tailisi and Shaiba all lived in the 13th century. So how could they have known Muhammad when they were living almost 700 years later? See, no one's looking at dates. That's why you've got to put it on a timeline. And we're the first to do that. What I'm telling you now, I'm not even put up on the internet yet. This is all new. You're getting it. Their Africans have heard it, and they're just rejoicing because this makes everything easy for them. Because the very questions have been asked, as John just said, the very questions that have been asked of Christianity, how do you know Jesus exists? How do you know he died on the cross? How do you know he rose again? Where is your eyewitness evidence? We have had to go and find it. And for the last 200 years, we've done just that. We have gone and found it, and we have looked for it, and we have been able to support it, not just with Christian writers. We've found it with people who are historians from that time. People like Thallus and Phlegon, and people like Tacitus and Josephus, Jewish, Roman, and Greek historians. They knew that Jesus exists. They saw him dead on the cross. They were debating it 20 years after he died, saying that the sun went dark and the earth shook. Within 20 years, they were debating this event. So we've been able to find it by going back and look at historical evidence for the person of Jesus Christ. Now we're asking the very same question of Islam. If we could do this with Jesus Christ from 2,000 years ago, come on, Muslims, divvy up. Where is any evidence for this man named Muhammad? Muhammad, not Muhammad. Don't confuse with Muhammad. Muhammad is way up north, and he's actually Jesus Christ. The Muhammad is Jesus Christ, the anointed one. The Jews were waiting for him. The Christians are still waiting for him. The Muhammad in Arabic has always been Jesus Christ. Look at St. Ambrose, look at Origen. They all refer to the Muhammad, those 4 letters, because the same 4 letters in Arabic that you have in Syriac, that you have in Aramaic, and that you have in Hebrew. Muhammad is in Song of Solomon 5:16. The altogether lovely one that Psalm Solomon's talking about. That's the Muhammad. It's in Hebrew. So this has been around for 3,200 years. Nothing new under the sun there, folks. That's why we need to go back and ask and demand for the Muslims, show us your evidence for this man named Muhammad, not Muhammad, because that's what we need to find. Now,
you've been digging into history of Islam, and last few years you've been focusing on Muhammad. And you've been teaching this around the world. You expressed that you've done some teachings in Africa. So what is the Muslim reaction? So what is their comeback? How they are debunking your arguments?
So far, I've not had anybody say, other than the fact that Jay's an idiot and he doesn't understand Arabic. This has nothing to do with Arabic. It has to do with Aramaic and Syriac and also Hebrew. But listen, I grant I'm not an expert in Arabic. I'm not the one that's actually coming up with this argument. I'm not the one that's actually introducing this argument. I'm just the communicator that's saying, folks, why is it that those who do understand Aramaic and Syriac and Arabic and Hebrew are all coming to the same conclusion? And that is, we've got the wrong man. You're looking at the wrong person. All these references to Muhammad in the 7th century, not one of them have placed him in the right place, doing the right thing, or at the right time. And they all have to do with other characters, not just one. There's a few of these Muhammads, because the Jews have a Muhammad who are the exilarchs, and the Christians have a Muhammad who is the anointed one yet to come a second time. So that's why we're saying, be careful, for Muslims. If you're going to confront us with material from the 7th century, not from the 9th and 10th century. What's more, don't even confront us from the 9th and 10th century, because the manuscripts you're dependent on to know who your Muhammad is, especially people like Al-Bukhari in Sahih Muslim. Sahih because they are perfect. Those are the two that Muslims use more than any other. Look and see the earliest manuscripts for both Muslim and for Bukhari. Muslim does not appear till the 14th century. Sahih Bukhari does not appear until the 15th century. That is 800 years too late. You're using Ottoman material. This is not even Abbasid material, nor is it Umayyad material. It is Ottoman material.
In 1800s. So,
okay, now that's something different. Now you're going and you're actually answering the question I asked about 10 minutes ago. Who actually gave us the sitta that we have?
So, Muslim respond to your historical questions are, you don't speak Arabic, therefore we are not going to take you seriously, right?
That's usually it's ad hominem. It's almost always ad hominem. And I said, listen, I don't mind the ad hominem. I'm used to it. I was at Speaker's Corner for 25 years. It just kind of runs off your back. We used to get it all the time. Usually when you get to ad hominem, that just shows that they don't have an argument. Ad hominem pretty much exposes them as saying, keep to the subject. I keep repeating it. You can, sticks and stones can hurt my bones, but words will never hurt me. And I think, that's the difficulty. They don't understand that once you start going to ad hominem, they have lost the debate. The audience around them sees that. But then put yourself in their shoes. In order for them to find this Muhammad, they're going to have to find material referring to him, but not the Muhammad of the north, up in Iraq and up in Syria and up in Jordan. Not that Muhammad. They've got to find a Muhammad from Mecca. That's the big problem. What are you going to do with Mecca? And you know where I go with Mecca on this. Mecca is the easiest to debunk because there's just no reference to it, not at all until the 8th century, at all. And so if there's no Mecca, then it doesn't matter what Muhammad you find.
So let me just understand
it's not the Muhammad of Islam.
Let me just understand that. You are saying the headquarters of Islam, Mecca, start being around 2 centuries after death of Muhammad?
No, if Muhammad had existed, let's just take
according to
632.
tradition.
If he had lived and died there and died in Medina in 632, we don't have any reference anywhere in any documentation for Mecca until 741. 741 is over a century later, not 2 centuries, a century later. But that Mecca, and that's the first time we see the word Mecca in any documentation form. That Mecca is way up in Turkey, so it's about 1,200 miles too far north. It's not on any map.
So according to
documentation prior to that. And remember, Mecca is hugely important for Muslims, not because it's the
let me
center
just-
of Islam.
let me just
It's the
under-
center of history.
let me just understand. So, according to Muslims, traditional Muslims, you are saying Muhammad lived, lived and murdered and died in a city which was not even existed, right?
Obviously, which means there was no Mecca.
According to Islamic tradition, right?
According to Islamic tradition, he was born there. He didn't die there. When he was 50 years old, by the time he was 622, he then moved to Medina and spent the last.
Okay, so that city was never existed. So he lived in a
Never
city
existed.
which was not existed.
It gets worse than that, though, Hatun. It's not just Muhammad we're talking about. According to chapter 7 of the Quran, Adam and Eve are there. So it's the very first interpretation for mankind. According to chapter 21 of the Quran, Abraham is there in Mecca, and he is rebuilding the Kaaba. So you're talking about 1900 BC. It should be there in 1900 BC. So don't just stop with Muhammad. It should be the most historical city in history, the oldest city in history, the earliest habitation for mankind. Someone, somewhere, at some time should have heard about it. We can't find one reference to it at all, until the 8th century AD.
I guess that's one of the advantages of the New Testament. You have the Roman government there, very meticulous with their records, and we still have those records available. So that gives a secular backdrop or confirmation of what's going on in the New Testament. What is in Arabia?
Stop right there, John. We have those records available. Now stop and think of what you've just said. We have the records from a time period when there was no parchment or vellum being used, where they was all written on papyrus, and yet we still have those records available. How is it that we can go back 2,000 years, at least 1,900 years, and find records, reference after reference to this person named Jesus Christ, much of it written on papyrus, and yet Muslims were not dependent on papyrus, because all of these writings were written in caliphal courts, which means they had all the money, all available. They would have had parchment and vellum at their disposal. Why can't we find one piece, not one page on vellum or parchment for the Quran from the 7th century or for any of these traditions from the 7th century?
Because Arabia is so wet that those materials would just disintegrate over time. So
have you looked at a map?
I'm just kidding. I've been there, so no.
Yeah, can you see? But it's incredulous that Muslims who are spending all their time trying to argue from the 9th to 10th, and now it's not going to be from the 9th and 10th. It's going to be from the 11th to the 16th century. From the 11th to the 16th century are when all these documents are written that we're talking about to support everything they know. Everything they know how to walk, talk, eat, drink, sleep comes from the 11th to the 16th century. None of them come from the 7th century, to say nothing of the 9th and 10th century. Bingo. So right there, can you see the problem they're going to have? In order to debate us, Hatun, they're going to have to find evidence from earlier than the 11th century. Good luck.
Yeah, they might need that. They might need Allah's help. Just a comment. First years of Muhammad's prophethood, he prayed towards Jerusalem, and after he changed his position towards Mecca. Why? Or Allah? Why the position is being changed? Can you comment on that from the traditional account? Also compare.
Yeah, obviously, what we have to do, and one of the things you're going to have to ask, when is the first time that we see this written down? And this is written down from the Siddha. The Siddha, the earliest Siddha that has this, is from a document from the 11th century called the Fez document. But this is not really referred to in that. The document that we have to go to find that account comes from, I just want to look at here, it's from the 13th, 14th, and the 16th century. It's the 16th century that Wustenfeld used mainly for many of these stories that you're talking about, of him changing the Qibla from Jerusalem. That comes from a 16th century document. 16th century is 900 years too late. That is an Ottoman reference. So you'll need to ask, what were the Ottomans doing at that time when they put this in there? And obviously this was a difficulty. It was a theological problem, knowing what about those who What are we going to do with Muhammad if everything we know about the Hajj? I mean, look at everything you know about the Hajj. Take a look at it. It all pre-existed in Jerusalem. The circumambulation 7 times counterclockwise, that's Jerusalem. The Kaaba, the word itself, Kaaba, that the cube, that's Jerusalem. And the Holy of Holies is known as the Kaaba, the cube in Hebrew. They running back and forth between Marwa and Safa that they do. Those 2 mountains, those aren't mountains, they're just rocks. That's Jerusalem. Marwa is Mount Moriah. Safa is Mount Scopus in Jerusalem. That's the Arabic transliteration for those 2 mountains. Everything comes from Jerusalem. So you can see this is a theological and a political discussion that's happening possibly in the 14th and 15th century, which had to be resolved. Did this man come from Jerusalem? If everything we're doing it can be antecedent to Jerusalem, they've got to bring him down to Mecca. So the story is perfect. The story is then introduced in the Sirah to show that he got a revelation from the angel Gabriel that he's to redo the Kaaba, redesign the Qibla down from Jerusalem, which was given to get. The reason it even went to Jerusalem, according to the Sirah, is because the Jews need to be brought on board. The Banu Kainuka, the Banu Anidir, and the Banu Qurayza family needed to be brought on board to amalgamate themselves with the Arabs that were already there. And that's why Muhammad was sent there, to eradicate this problem, this friction between these 2 groups. That's why he then had the Qibla point towards Jerusalem. That's a very convenient story. But when they rejected him in 624, and they rejected him, he then turned and he started fighting them and destroying them and killing them. Then, of course, you had to have a new revelation from the angel Gabriel to redirect it back down to Mecca again.
To add what Jay said from the Islamic tradition, Surah 2 talks about Allah is changing the direction of the prayer to please Muhammad, but doesn't name the place as Jerusalem. So that direction is being changed so that Muhammad can be pleased on that. What have you got? Do you think what is coming from?
But I mean, take that one step further. Take that one step further, Hatun. What is the name that is referred to in the Quran? What's the word for that, the Kaaba? It's Masjid al-Haram. There's no place called Mecca there. Do you see a reference to Mecca there? There's no place called the Kaaba there. Do you see a reference to Kaaba there? It's always Masjid al-Haram. And Masjid al-Haram is the forbidden place of bowing, which could be anywhere. And certainly it would also originally have been in Jerusalem. That would have been the forbidden place of bowing in Arabic.
Okay, so what do you think is happening in 2025? Because you said you are here for a short time, so I just want to make sure I get my question in. So what do you think coming from the historical destruction of Islam in 2025?
Well, I went down with Dr. Daniel Janasik, who's one of my co-teachers on our MAPI program, where we go through all this material. We went to the ETS conference in San Diego back in November. And San Diego, the ETS is Evangelical Theological Society, and there's about 3,000 theologians all come together. Anybody who's anybody in the United States come there. It's the American equivalent of what you used to go to call ELF in Poland. And so we were there, and we were both presenting papers. He was presenting a paper on Abd al-Malik himself, because you have to go to Abd al-Malik to know why Islam actually. What then was what or who was the one that started or created or became the antecedent to what later became Islam? And so you have to pinpoint it is Abd al-Malik. So he was going to give that paper, and I was going to get a follow-up paper after that from on this whole thing on the extant manuscripts, where and what the dates, and then also the word Mahmud. And just about the time I was about ready to come forward, the door opened and a whole pile of people came in. And there was Dr. William Craig was there. There was Michael Licona there. There was Sam Shamoun. These are big names. And they're big names in theological circles, but they're also huge names like Sam Shamoun in the work that we're doing, Hatun. And he came specifically just to hear this material. At the end of that, I only went for about half an hour and unpacked somewhat of what I've unpacked just now. He came up to me and they said, "We want your PowerPoint. We need this. This has to be written down. You've got to get this in print." So, and you've asked me this, and others have asked me, why is it you don't write this up? Because putting up on YouTube is good, it's fine, and it's getting tens. In fact, we're getting millions of hits. But the problem is you don't know where on the tube I've said what or where we have introduced what idea. But in a book, you can do that. The difficulty is, and they said, could you please write this book down? So we are. That's what we're going to do in 2025.
Okay, so focus on putting this in written version. There is a question for you, Jay. If the sin, it would be great if you can unpack that word sin, is wrong. Any theories on why Mecca was chosen as the center of Islam?
A standard Islamic narrative, that's the Islamic traditions. That's our way of saying Islamic traditions. It's tongue-in-cheek. It's taken from Qadi's debate, or this interview that he had with Muhammad Hijab back in 2020. So the standard Islamic narrative, the Islamic traditions, which are the tafsir, the tahriq, the hadith, and the sirah, those four genres, if they are wrong, which we're saying absolutely, every one of them wrong, then why in the world would you choose Mecca? Well, you have to choose Mecca because Jerusalem no longer is sufficient. That's why you could not no longer. That's why in many of the respects, even Dan Gibson is finding that many of those mosques that he's found from the 7th century are facing not only Petra, they're also facing Jerusalem for a reason. And it all depends on whether or not the mosque was an earlier temple of the Nabateans, which would be Petra, or there was a temple of those who come in the line of Abraham and Isaac, which would be, of course, Jerusalem. So you have the Ishmaelites versus the Isaacs. Those who come in the line of Ishmael or the line of Isaac. And depending on what your temple was, which later became mosque, the Qibla would be facing either one of those two places. So obviously you can't have Mecca. I mean, you can't have Jerusalem as your sanctuary. You now have to distinguish yourself, and you also have to follow where the black stone is. And the black stone, from what we're finding out, was placed in Petra at the time of 678, when Ibn Zubair was attacked and was actually rebelled against Abd al-Malik. He was the governor of Petra under Abd al-Malik, and he had to flee. But he stayed there behind, and he sent his children and the women and all those who were not needed for battle down south. Looks like they sent them down to the Hijaz, where he is originally from. And with them, they took the black stone. So you've got to follow the black stone, because the black stone is where God's presence is. That was given that idea. The idea was introduced by Elagabalus in the 2nd century. So that is well known to the black stone. Wherever the black stone went, the pilgrims would follow. So when the pilgrims started following, instead of going to Petra anymore, they were now moving down towards Mecca. It stands to reason that the Abbasids, who hated the Umayyads, who didn't want nothing to do with the Umayyads, had been defeated by the Umayyads, and they were gaining power, while the Umayyads were starting to lose power. So by the end of the 7th century, they said, let's go ahead and make that our sanctuary, and let's have an alliance with those who are from the clan of Ibn Zubair. Once that happened, of course, now the Abbasids have a sanctuary. But once you make a sanctuary, you've got to reproduce everything that was in the original sanctuary. Now can you understand why all of the 5 stages of the Hajj can be originally found in Jerusalem, but in a facsimile form. They're more like models. They're not real. They're not the real originals. In the same way, if you go to Las Vegas, you will see an Eiffel Tower there, and you'll see a pyramid, but they're facsimiles. They're much smaller versions of what the real thing is. That's basically what they did in Mecca, and that's why they had to build the Kaaba there, and they had to build also the Marwa and the Safa, and they had to build the Kaaba, and they have to circumambulate going counterclockwise as the Jews did. Once the Abbasids took power, and once they came to power in 749, the mid-8th century, then everything got directed down. Now that's where Dan Gibson comes in so handy, because you can follow this sequence just by following where the Qiblas are going and how the Qiblas changes, the 4 different directions that he refers to. You can follow the sequences by following what was happening politically on the ground. It has to do with politics, an awful lot of this. But why are we surprised when much of Islam has to do with politics?
Okay. So you talked about how anyone wants to ask any question to Jay, or I'm going to continue with my statement. So you talked about how you are doing teachings all around the world, and in 2025 you are focusing on writing book and also kind of continue to expose this historical side of Islam. How can people pray for you, Jay?
Well, yeah, there's a lot you can pray for 2000. It's going to be a busy year because I'm also going to 11 different countries to also introduce this. because they want it, and I want to go to the countries that need it the most. So I'm not going to tell you the name of the countries. I don't dare do that in public because I don't want people to know I'm going to be there. I have to be very careful, as you well know. I'm like you. We're both very high profile. So in that case, if you could just pray that we get this material across and that we get it to the right people who can use it better than we can. We're here as communicators, Robert Spencer, yourself, myself, Sam Shamoon, David Wood. We're basically taking what people do and we communicate it so that people can understand it. But then we also make sure that we get it in their hands so that they can use it. And that's what 2025, hopefully this will all be written up. Now, I'm going to put a caveat on that. It will be written up, but I will put a date on the time we publish it. Because as you're finding, as you've said many times to me, Jay, what you said last year is not what you're saying this year. That's the problem with historical criticism. Historical criticism, which has never been done before on a religion that has made claims that have never been investigated, those type of historical criticisms need to be upgraded. And that's why you're always coming up with new evidence. And we follow the evidence on the ground. So when we write this up, when Daniel and I write this up, and it'll be Dan Brubaker's publishing house, they'll be taking it on, the same one that did his the 20 changes of the Quran. So that will be the publishing house. We'll put the date on when that is published. And we say, this is the date that we know as of, let's just say, June of 2025. This is where we stand. However, we will put a caveat there. It may change within another year or 2 years. We may have to move on from that and come up with new categories. That will safeguard us so that we can't be sued or made to look like idiots, like most Muslims like to do. You're always lying, Jay. You say this thing and you say this another time. That's the difficult. It's a good problem. It's not a bad problem. Since I first introduced this material in 1995, I have not really gone back on anything I've said since 1995. When I first debated Dr. Jamal Badawi on this material, the 10 different challenges, historical challenges. So in the last 30 years, I haven't changed. The evidence has changed. And what that means is we're finding better and we're getting much more succinct. So that's why I'm not ready to say now how Islam really began. I'm not going to say that yet. And we're not going to do that in the book. We're not going to say how Islam began. That would be putting ourselves out there and to be hammered. What we're going to say is this is the evidence we have so far for the book, The Man and the Place. You come up to your conclusions as to what you thought or you think how Islam actually began.
Okay, so basic problem is so far is you need to shorten your answers and then answer the question instead of writing essay to my question. That's something we can learn it because you did very well at Speaker's Corner, just answering the question and then coming to the next question stuff. So my question was to you. Now I forgot even my question.
What are you going to do in 2025?
Yeah, you said you are delivering 11 countries and you are writing a book. You don't have the date for the publishing the book. Anything else?
Your question was, how can we pray for him?
Yeah,
Okay,
pray for those 11 countries and pray for the book.
Are you sure?
I have a question real quickly. Is the book going to be covering what you were just talking about in general?
Yeah. It'll be just, and
It'll
it'll be quick and to the point, John. It'll be an introductory book on a popular level with all the sources. That's the nice thing. With a book, you can put the sources in there so that people can go and actually do their own research.
Very good. Thank you.
What we're asking for.
Okay, Jay. You've got lots of things coming. I am very excited that in the body of Christ, we are all different. So you are looking from the historical side of Islam, digging holes into it. Others are looking from the traditional side of it. Others are looking from the political side of it. And everyone is digging hole in Islam because there are lots of holes in Islam. At the end, what area you are focusing, it's helpful to remember all this is to destroy the false ideology of Islam and bring people to Christ, preach the glorious gospel of Lord Jesus Christ so that people can make informed decisions. They will know they don't have to stuck in that false ideology.
There you go. Thank you. God bless you. It's good to see Anthony.
Nice to meet you.
Bye, Jay.
Over, Anthony. I'm over
Bye,
now.
Jay. Thank you very much for coming.
Bye-bye.
God bless you.
Peace of Christ be with you, Anthony. How are you?
And also with all of you. I'm doing well.
Welcome.
Yes, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank
So-
you. I was sitting here. I didn't have a warning that you were going to pull me up. Like, I guess there's no way to really do that. But
Well,
I was about to start reading over here because
I saw your
I'm not content without a book in my hand.
I saw your picture there, and then I put you on the screen.
Yeah, I mean, I was in the dock. I knew I was waiting, but I thought that you were in the midst of something with Jay, and
No,
I
I
thought,
was just trying to get quick answers to my short questions, but he's not much different than from you. Like, you ask him very basic question, he writes a PhD for the answer. But I think we got at the end highlights of 2024 from him, the way he traveled and then took historical materials with him wherever he went, and people are using that, and he's going to focus on writing a book as well as traveling and continue to teach. So I think that would be the highlights of his 2024 and what is coming for 2025.
so you did that for him in what, 60 seconds?
He did like
Yeah.
49 minutes.
Her question was in 60 minutes. Yeah. No,
She summarized him in 60 seconds.
that's it.
And how are you doing, Anthony?
I'm doing well. Really busy, but that's a good busy. So no complaints here.
Why are you busy?
Oh, just the regular stuff I do. I do prison ministry, so that keeps me busy. It's always got potential to grow, and that happens. Currently, I'm doing a lot of stuff in a relatively near prison that we've really just been able to get a lot more stuff going on inside the prison. It's not as easy as you might think sometimes. You'd think they'd be throwing the doors open to gospel ministers to come in and try and have an impact on prisoners, but that's not always the case. There's various reasons for that, but the door keeps opening for more opportunities. So really happy about that. And I also preach regularly on Sundays at a church that's currently without a pastor. So that keeps me busy too. And then I try and stay on top of whatever I'm doing on YouTube. So,
Okay.
Wow.
and of course I have a wife and kids. So
That's full time.
Double full time, I guess. Since you mentioned that you are involved with prison ministry, and earlier beginning of the live stream, we talked about the importance of actually pointing people out who are the ones who are good at replying their emails. I would like to publicly bring everyone's public attention. I'm waiting answer to the email which I send you. God knows.
I think I'm 3 emails removed from being caught up with you.
Okay, so one of the email I asked you was, since you are into prison ministry, what do you think best way to deal with mainly the radical Muslims in prison? So what kind of study would you suggest, or what kind of structure would you suggest Muslims to be in prison?
So for Christians dealing with Muslims, or
Christians dealing with Muslims, or like I did receive the email was asking me, there are lots of Muslims there are lots of people are becoming Muslim in prisons, and when they go out, and then person kind of put a couple of examples. When they go out, one of their kind of focus becomes is try to like harm other people. For example, there was this guy become a Muslim in prison, left the prison, and within a year after prison, he was actively buying guns to murder me. So the person who sent the email is asking, what are the ways anything can be done within the prison that kind of stop the growth of Islam? Like Islam grows more in prison than outside. So what are the ways we can deal with these things, and what are the things you think as a Christian we can do once these individuals are out of prison?
Yeah. So first of all, my own interest in Islam was born in prison. I was converted in 1993 in prison. I was a criminal running the streets and got in trouble, went into prison. And it was there that I got a Bible. I started reading it at first just for entertainment purposes. I had nothing to do, so why not read this book that I got for free? I started reading it. I was convicted, became a Christian. But then I assumed all sorts of people would be interested in this good news. It was truly good news. And I thought everybody would recognize it as such. I was sorely mistaken. Found out they weren't all too happy about the possibility of their sins being forgiven. And they were even angry about it. I thought, well, this is strange. You'd think I said something terrible about their mothers or something, but I'm just telling them how they could have life, and I was taken as a bad guy. But that's when I encountered Muslims. First of all, it was the Nation of Islam where I was that was most active. That, of course, is not a accurate reflection of Islam, though it does take some things from it. But it's a gateway drug, right? It's sort of what happens is people learn about the Nation of Islam. They become part of it because in the prison, it gives them kind of a cover. If you're in prison, there's potential for violence, for people doing stuff to you, and you want to be part of a group. And the Nation of Islam will provide that for you. You can be part of this group, and you're sort of secure from certain kinds of threats. But what ends up happening is these people learn that this is not authentic Islam, and so they sometimes find their way into quote unquote Orthodox Islam. So what happened for me was somebody put in my hands what at the time were, I think, great books for me on Islam, as well as good books on Christian theology. But the book that I was given is not necessarily what I would recommend today, except perhaps as a introduction. It's because it's not a book that goes into great depth or anything, but it was Robert Morey's Islamic Invasion. And he's talking about the falsehood of Islam, its false doctrines, but also talks about its militancy, the fact that it is, in fact, a militant religion. Now, for me, I wasn't really interested in the militant aspect at the time. This is pre 9/11. And so it didn't really seem to have much to it as far as my experience. Muslims weren't necessarily known by people, unfortunately, for all their horrific acts that they've committed throughout history. That came on people's radars at 9/11. Well, anyway, so I read this book. I realized this is what Islam is. So I was exposing the Nation of Islam adherents by showing, hey, look, this isn't even what Islam teaches. And by the way, what Islam actually teaches is false too. So don't go that route. Well, when I got out, I started reading a bunch of other stuff. And I mean, there's just a tremendous amount of good stuff that people can get. And somebody was saying it in the chat, and I think they're right. Some of this stuff by Jay and Robert, it would be good material to put in people's hands. A Muslim, one of the things, and you guys know this well, and so I'm saying it in your hearing, but I know mostly for the benefit of the listeners, but Muslims really believe they have Allah's word on every matter. They think the Quran is Allah's direct speech, and the Quran addresses Christianity. And so they already think they know a whole lot about what we believe, even though Allah rarely gets it right. Not just on Christianity, but ask Allah about any topic and he ends up bungling everything. But they think they have Allah's word on it. And so when you're trying to respond to them and tell them, no, this isn't what Christians believe, they don't even allow you to define Christianity for them, because to accept your definition, for example, if we say the Trinity is belief in one God, they can't accept our definition and argue against what we believe. They have to insist that what we believe is really belief in three gods, because otherwise they're accepting that Allah's word is false. So they have a lot of gusto because they think that Allah has given his word on these things. And so it's very important, I think, to show the holes that exist in the standard narrative of the Quran. Number one, the Quran has not been perfectly preserved. So books that address that would be helpful. Dan Brubaker's book being one of many that would be relevant for people. I'm just thinking here of ways to really take the wind out of their sails. If they lose part of what it allows them to be so feverish and active and so forth, they have this great zeal, is because they think they've got good grounds for certainty. But when you start chipping away at that certainty, they stop losing their zeal. And that also puts them in a better position to maybe listen to something else and consider it. So anything like that, but then also books that will show how the Quran very clearly teaches that the Bible is the preserved word of God. One of my favorite books, I don't hear people mentioning it much, but I think it's a great book. Maybe people just haven't seen it. It's not like it's a hard to access book, but it's written by Abdiya Akbar Abdul Haq. It's probably a pseudonym, but it's now called Sharing Your Faith with a Muslim. In the past, it had some other name, but that book has one of the best, I think, presentations of what the Quran is saying about the Bible. There might be stuff out there I'm not familiar with that goes past this, and I'm sure there's stuff out there I haven't read, but there might be something better. But for me, that's a really, really good book. I really enjoyed it, benefited from it a lot, and it's one I read over 20 years ago. And of course, there's still a bunch of great stuff on this on Answering Islam. On the Answering Islam site, there's a whole section dealing with what the Quran says about the Bible. So if we can get these resources into the prisons and into the hands of Christian prisoners, and maybe even so, when I go into the prison, there are book tables. There's stuff where there's places for literature, and I can bring in literature and set it on the table for anybody to pick up. And so that's something I do. Other people, if they have access to prisons, should consider doing that, or just sending stuff into prisoners, because what happens is that prisoner, usually they don't hold on to everything. Some prisoners might. I was the kind of prisoner that kept every piece of literature I got. But a lot of these guys will try and offload some of it because they need more room for, you don't have endless room. I couldn't have had a library very extensive in prison, but I had like 2 shelves in my cell in prison. I was pretty rare because everybody else would get rid of their books and get new ones. But if you send it into a prison to a prisoner, it'll probably circulate to other prisoners. So stuff challenging the preservation of the Quran, showing that the Quran teaches the preservation of the Bible, and then stuff questioning the historical veracity of Islamic claims, and then good books on Christian theology, because I mean, Muslims will, they attack Christian theology, poorly informed, of course, but Christians, even if they know their theology, if they know their beliefs well, they don't always detect how their view is being misrepresented. That happens in conversations all the time. So I think good stuff.
So there is in prisons they've got this thing called texters. So people use it to just send text, but also you can listen audio things. I guess if we find a ways to kind of put certain books in audio that prisoners can listen, because it will be uncomfortable for under the Muslim gangs, potential Muslims or people who just convert into Islam are reading like Christian sources or reading writings from Christians. I know, for example, Ahmed Didat's some of his books are in audio form in prisons. That's already very dangerous, and all he does is attacking and misrepresenting Christian doctrine. And then they've got tablets where you can watch videos. So finding the ways, kind of pick up some David Wood's videos, some of gospel presentations, and then finding the ways to kind of put those things in those tablets. I guess you need to get in touch with the contractor or whoever does those things, and then put it there. It will be available for people to watch and listen.
Yeah, one of the problems is, so these prisoners, different prisons do different things, and things are constantly changing, and some prisons will have different kinds of tablets. But they're always restricted. So a person that has these things, that for us they're like iPads, but they're very restricted. They can't just go on YouTube and watch whatever they want, or it's like they're in Pakistan. We used to have people contacting us from Pakistan on the Answering Islam website saying they can't get our stuff because it's blocked in Pakistan. So we would send them CDs or thumb drives and stuff like that. But Yeah, so there's that difficulty. Each area might have a different tool that they're using, and you have to get these things on different platforms. And I don't know. I mean, I'm involved in some of this. I'm not the guy that does that, but there's a ministry that we do a lot of stuff with that provides us with a lot of written materials that also put stuff on some of these tablets. I'd have to ask one of them exactly the steps they go through to do that. But yeah, I mean,
it is causing concern to the people, especially as they are hearing this individual who become a Muslim in prison now out and actively trying to murder people, and then someone murders people, and then they end up in prison, and then they end up with like Amjad Chowdhury and his crown, and like they are becoming like more Muslim than before they were. So it's like concerning what is happening in prisons.
Yeah, one of the things that I remember when I was in the prison was there was a guy. This was before I was a Christian. I first went in, and he was a really nice guy. Really, I thought he was a pleasant person to be around. Not all prisoners are just curmudgeons or ill-tempered or whatever. There are people that would just strike you as similar to your next door neighbor. People get in there for various reasons. Not everybody's just an angry, destructive, violent person. Anyways, this guy got caught up in Islam, and suddenly it's really a strange thought to think. Here's this guy that went to prison, and he was better before he became a Muslim. I mean, I saw this guy turn before my eyes. I was like, what in the world? And, one of the things that I think makes Islam so appealing to people in prison is, first of all, it's a naturalistic religion. And here's what I mean by this. Not that it doesn't claim there's a God, or that it doesn't claim he does supernatural things or something like that. But its whole view of salvation is entirely naturalistic. There's nothing authentically supernatural about it. There's nothing like what we're talking about when we talk about being born again, right? Regenerated, an action of the Spirit, removing our stony hearts and giving us a heart of flesh. Nothing like God writing his law upon people's hearts. And it's all external. So what you have when you look at people converting to Islam is people adopting all sorts of external things, external dress, external behaviors, rituals, not eating this, not doing that. And it's not really addressing the heart. In fact, they don't even seem overly concerned with their sinful thoughts. Certainly not like the Bible teaches us to think, or rooting these things out of the heart. None of that is present in Islam. And so Islam gives prisoners who are bent on evil, some of them even on violence, it gives them a way of pacifying their conscience. They are religious. They're inescapably religious. All people are religious. They're made in the image of God. And so they know naturally that someone made them, and they are obligated to serve him, and woe to them if they don't. And so in Islam, they're allowed to make themselves think that they're okay and holy without having to really change who they are fundamentally. And so what this then means, though, is that for a lot of them, they can be violent even in the prison. Well, I say even in the prison, like that's unexpected. I just mean before they get out, these guys they're acting like thugs. They're acting like other prison gangs, because Islam allows them to be religious and the same old person they were before. But now they can justify it. Now they've got justification. They can say, oh, well, this pleases Allah. This is consistent with the religion. And so that's why when these guys get out, they're ready for the picking. They may not have heard in the prison necessarily that jihad is what it is. They might have heard something different in the prison, but it's very easy for a Muslim who's committed to the Quran to be radicalized, not because obviously I don't like when people distinguish radical Islam from true Islam as though radical Islam is a perversion. It's not. But what I mean by radicalized is you could have a person, especially in a Western context, who wrongly thinks that Islam is peaceful, and they become Muslim accepting that idea, just like they might think Muhammad was a great guy and a perfect pattern of conduct. But when they're eventually confronted with what the Quran actually teaches and what's true about Muhammad, they've got a choice. They either ditch Islam because it's not what they were told it was, or they get on board with this new information and they become jihadis and they live like Muhammad. And so that's why, I mean, I think undermining their confidence in Islam, you know, even if they don't utterly ditch it, which we ultimately want them to do and turn to Christ, that's the ultimate goal. But when you chip away at their certainty, people aren't as willing to strap a bomb to themselves and blow themselves up if that confidence isn't there. And the confidence is there as long as their head is filled with those lies. The Quran has never been changed. You know, Muhammad was the perfect pattern of conduct, that sort of thing.
Right.
I am going to bring up a question. I think I'll start with your brother in Christ first, and then go to John, and then give Anthony for 1 minute to respond.
That's not going to happen.
And after that, I will have to ask Anthony what was his highlights of 2024. So 99.9% of people who read the Holy Quran, open mind, are believing Muslims today, right?
No.
I'm sorry. I was about to answer, but you guys are first.
I know that's
I
a
couldn't help
common. I know it's a common talking point Muslims try to point out. So if you read the Quran, you really read it, then you'll become a Muslim. I'm like, no. I mean, seriously, sit down, read it. We've gone through sections of the Quran live reading it, and it just highlighted how much junk it really is, how there is no flow to it, how there is no actual rhyme or reason, how it just meanders back and forth, and the beginning of the chapter will have nothing to do with the rest of it. Yeah, Robert Spencer is much easier to read.
Yeah, I'm really glad you're asking this question, because when I saw this, I was like, what? Either this person is awful at math, or just completely ignorant, or very confused, or all of the above.
Or maybe that's sarcasm.
Yeah, I think it's sarcasm. This can't be. I think it is sarcasm.
Well, I don't want to. I wouldn't want to speak over you if you had anything else to add.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, I'm pretty sure everybody in this room, and you can all speak for yourselves, but personally, I've read the Quran, and if it were true, then I would want to know. There's never been once, though, that I've opened up the Quran and been like, wow, I am now a Muslim. In fact, every single time I read anything in the Quran, I'm like, oh, thank you, God, that I am not a Muslim.
Well, just taking how the Quran is written compared to the Bible, it's very clear, because I'll go back and I'll read the Bible over and over again, different sections. Definitely love the historical books in the Old Testament where you have an entire story and it's laid out, and then you turn to the Quran and you can't do anything with that.
That's the point that I was going to bring up. This is an old talking point, isn't it? That the Quran is perfect. It's miraculous. It's as soon as you read it, it can't be reproduced. No one else can do anything like it. But if that's the case, then why do we have to refer to the Hadiths? It's not complete in itself, according to Islamic theology. So you have to go to other sources, and then there's a ranking of those other sources of how good or bad they are. And so if the Quran was complete, it was on the same level as the Bible, then you don't need to go to any sources. You can do that with the Bible. The Bible is sufficient for all our theology. Not so for the Quran.
And not only that, but regarding the comment you made about, no one can make anything like it. I know I did a whole stream talking about that or at least a large portion of one, because even Satan made something like it. Yeah, and even Muhammad didn't know the difference between Allah's version and Satan's version. So,
Let's see.
and also lots of other people have met that challenge, and people have not known the difference between the Quran and
Well, it's
others.
it's
But
such an incredibly stupid challenge because the way Muslims currently read that challenge is you guys produce something and then we will judge if it's like the Quran. That's not what the Quran's challenge is. It says you produce something like it and then you judge.
yeah,
Who the judge matters.
Yeah.
Because guess what? I would say that there's quite a few books out there that are much better quality than the Quran is. In fact, I enjoy reading the Hadith much more than I do the Quran.
A little more context there. Hey, I'm going to need to take this time to bow out as well. I want to thank you for this opportunity. The guests you have here are fantastic, except for Robert Spencer.
Oh.
No,
I
he,
thought you were going to say me.
I wouldn't say you're still here. I can't say that.
Yeah,
He's gone. I can say that. So no, it's been very good.
In, John.
So what's that?
Thank you for joining in.
Thank you.
You
And,
keep eye on
thank you
your
for
time.
leaving. No, I'm kidding.
make space for someone else. Okay, bye. all.
See you. So I have read the Quran with open mind, and then I need to put stitches to close those things. Okay, like literal stitches. Yeah, like real stitches to close it. And now every time when I read the Quran with open heart, open mind, I've got to take pills for it. It's that painful. And people who read the Quran with open mind, even with closed mind, they become ex-Muslim, and especially if they are Muslim. Anthony Rogers, 99.9% of people who read the Holy Quran with open mind are believing Muslims today, right?
Okay. Well, so all sorts of good points already made. Let me say something about this open mind idea. I mean, first of all, let me just confess that, and I'm not at all ashamed to say this, I think people are working against reality when they pretend that they're just blank slates and they're neutral and so forth. When I first read the Quran, I did so as a committed servant of the Lord Jesus Christ. So I read it with Christian eyes. I didn't read it as the word of Christ, who is my Lord. I read it as a book that was opposed to my Lord. And so I grant freely that I wasn't neutral when I approached it, but that doesn't mean that I wasn't honest in trying to understand it and that sort of thing and evaluate it. And the thing that was true of me, that I approached it as a believing Christian, other people approach it with other beliefs. Everybody has beliefs that you couldn't make any progress in anything if you didn't have some notions in your head. It's impossible to just erase all the ideas that you have when you approach something. You do so. If I told you that, I turned left in my room the other day and I saw a ghost run past me. I didn't, but my point is that people are going to have an immediate thought about that. Like they're going to think, well, that's not true, he's hallucinating. Or they're going to think, oh, maybe they say, okay, maybe he did have that kind of an experience. Or, but the reason people are going to respond these different ways is because of their background beliefs. Some people think that sort of thing happens and happens all the time. Other people don't think that happens. They don't think they're ghosts. So the way you receive what I say is in large measure influenced by what you believe. And so anyway, I'm just saying that nobody approaches the Quran or anything else with a just neutral mind.
I did 15 years ago.
But well, you had ideas about whether God exists or not, and what kind of being he must be, and who you are, and all that. And the Quran is going to either agree or disagree with that. But in my view, if it's a book from God, then it can break through your assumptions. It can break through the walls that you might have up. That's what the Bible did to me. I read the Bible and I didn't believe it. I didn't even know what it taught. I went into it thinking I was, whatever I should be, And anyway, so the Bible was able to break through all those things. And so if the Quran is Allah's word, if Allah is the true God, then he should be able to get through that. But now, the other thing that I said is just because a person has beliefs and commitments doesn't mean they can't read it honestly. I read the Quran. There are many things that when I read the Quran as a Christian, I assumed the Quran would teach because it's quote unquote a theistic book, a book about God, a God who created and so forth. So I expected there to be all sorts of common ground on God, for example. I expected the Quran to teach that Allah's omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, all these things that I believe as a Christian. And where I'd really disagree is when it talks about Jesus and salvation and that sort of stuff. But the more I read the Quran, the more the Quran kept forcing me to think differently, that this God that it's presenting is nothing but a reworked version of the old paganism that Muhammad was surrounded by. Muhammad may have ditched a lot of the other deities that his tribesmen and other people in Arabia believed in, but his view of God wasn't significantly different from them. It had some influences from Jews and Christians, but even those influences were not all that great. Some of the Jewish influence on Muhammad reflects Jews whose heads were filled more with the Talmud than the Bible. And I'll give you an obvious example. It's not as obvious to people, but when you look at the Jews of Arabia, they were thoroughgoing anthropomorphists. And what I'm saying here is not really contested by scholarship. It's pretty well known among scholars that the Jews of Arabia were crass anthropomorphists. They thought of their deity as a being that had certain spatial temporal constraints. They spoke of him in a way. That's why when you see Muslims talking about the hadith collections, one of the things that you hear some of them getting really worked up over are what they call Israeliyat hadith. That is hadith that in some measure are reported by Jews, as even Jewish Muslims, because they're suspect in their eyes, especially to the Muslims who don't believe Allah has body parts. They especially hate those hadith because they reflect what those Arabian Jews believed that were just anthropomorphic. Anyways, so I read the Quran thinking it taught other things that I agreed with, but then realized it really doesn't. And by the way, I wanted to say, Eric had mentioned how poor the Quran is, and he mentions better to read Spencer's book. That was my experience, except with Yusuf Ali. My background, I already mentioned I was converted in prison, but I didn't pay attention in school at all. The only thing I could do well was read, because for whatever reason that came natural to me. But I didn't pay attention to anything else in school. I didn't even go to school if I could get away with it. And so when I picked up Yusuf Ali's translation of the Quran, one of the things that stood out to me immediately was, and it shows you I can compliment a Muslim, but I thought, man, this guy has a really good command of the English language. I mean, this guy was a really good writer. You read his footnotes, you read his introductions. I just thought this is really, really good. I always pay attention when I'm reading stuff to people's writing styles, because I'm trying to learn from it myself. But it contrasted starkly with the Quran itself. You've got his introductions, his footnotes, and these read really well. But the Quran, it was like, oh, this thing, not the same quality. And then I realized it's even worse than I knew, because Yusuf Ali in his translation was cleaning up the Quran a good bit. And then I realized all Muslim translations are doing this. They're all trying to make the Quran look better than it really is. It reads very poorly no matter what the translation, but take away the translation, just look at the Arabic, and it's even worse. So anyways, those are my thoughts. I don't think that it's true that, it's not true in my case that reading the Quran convinces me to be a Muslim. And I know countless people that have read it that aren't Muslims. There's just no way. I don't know everybody in the world, but I know enough people that I think it counts for at least inductively saying that the figure 99% just can't be true.
Yeah, I've never even had someone in the comments tell me, oh, because you read the Quran on your live stream, I'm a Muslim now. Like, That figure
What?
seems awfully bloated.
Even the people that I've invited on my live streams have called in, Muslims who have called in, I've never had one of them tell me that the reason why they are a Muslim today is because they read the Quran.
I guess they told you the reason why they are Muslim is kind of they put together the objections of Christian faith or something, other faiths.
Yes, that's what I get 99% of the time. You also get some of the, well, my parents are this way and this is how I was raised up. But I don't get this massive number of Muslims coming to me saying, see, I read the Quran and right here, this section right here spoke to me, and that's why I am a Muslim today. No, not at all.
That reminds me, there's an old Arab poet named Abu Tayman. He said, "The sword is more telling than the book." And what he meant by that is he meant many things. You know, a poet is often trying to communicate all sorts of ideas with little pithy sayings. But he's saying that it's really the sword that has been more determinative for conversions to Islam than the book. And that doesn't have to be the literal sword, but just, force, subjugation, oppression, that sort of thing. And it's true even in the life of Muhammad. He's getting his alleged revelations, and I'm here, of course, assuming for the sake of argument that Muhammad was a historical figure and all that. For me, it doesn't really much matter. If he's historical, he's got a bad history, enough to reject him, more than enough to reject him. If he was not historical, then he's not even a viable candidate to accept. But in their own accounts, Muhammad is getting his revelations, and the vast majority of his kinsmen are not converting. It's not until he went from Mecca to Medina, got some power, and then began to throw his weight around that you eventually get people becoming Muslims. So it just isn't the case that the Quran has that persuasive power. I
recently spoke to someone from Libya, not from Libya, someone who went to Libya, and then heard the azan, the call to prayer, and then she was like, "Oh, this is so lovely, blah blah," and then she decided to become a Christian. Become a Muslim. And when I spoke to her, by that stage she was Muslim for 7 years, and she moved to Libya. She married this Libyan guy. She hates everything about Islam, like everything, and she can't get out. She's asking me to help her to get out of the country. It's like that bad. But the reason she converted is because she heard this call to prayer and sound was so beautiful. And then she just like, "Oh yeah, I'll become a Muslim." And then her life is just very much messed up now. I'm going to bring up a couple of spare chats and questions and comments, okay? This is getting busier. I think your brother in Christ, this is to you. Christian, so you are the Christian version of Muslim cowboy.
To be fair, you can answer how you want, but
I had it a long time ago.
Long before the
Muslim cowboy was calling himself that.
And I guess you wouldn't follow Muhammad's teaching to the dot, and you wouldn't want to practice them anyway.
No, okay. I'm good.
Okay,
I'm good. I've read too much. I've read way too much.
Thank you for your generosity, Joshua. Apostate of Allah, God bless you as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Amit, I wish you a very happy New Year, everyone. It's going to be like next year very soon. Hussein Mashni, God bless you, brother. Thank you very much for your generosity. So my spare chat is very, very new, okay? And it is not there for anyone to kind of use it. Only your questions will be answered if you put it there stuff, okay? It doesn't work like that. But there is this question. Does Quran teach the incarnation? Anyone wants to comment on that?
Well, they actually had two comments following that to kind of clarify what they're referring to.
Quran says Jesus is a word and spirit of Allah, and according to that, apparently that makes him to think that this is incarnation, sound incarnation.
Definitely, if you take it in context with John 1, then
So
definitely
you are reading
looks like
from Christian perspective, you mean, right?
yeah, from Christian perspective. And then there's also the place in the Quran that talks about the Jews and the Christians taking their priests and their rabbis as gods,
Right.
along with Allah and Jesus.
Yeah.
So I could see where someone could get that sort of feeling from the earlier sections of the Quran.
So you are reading from the Christian perspective with under the submission of the Bible, and looking at Surah 4 verse 171, Surah 9 verse 30, and you are coming to conclusion Jesus is spirit of Allah, then word of Allah, and then cast into Mary's tummy as a baby. Okay.
Well, so to some extent, yes, but it's interesting more from the perspective that Surah 4:171 seems to be trying to refute biblical Christianity, seems to be trying to refute Jesus as the Son of God, as God incarnate, but then accidentally affirms Jesus as God in some ways. So it's not so much that we think that the Quran itself is trying to teach that Jesus was incarnate, that Jesus is God, that Jesus is the Son of God, but more of like, even when it's trying to horribly take people away from truth, it's accidentally still pointing back to truth.
Yeah, basically, Muhammad had no clue what he was talking about. He didn't understand Christianity. He didn't understand Judaism. He understood his pagan theology around him and was basically putting that on top of hearsay he heard from the Christians and Jews.
Don't call him all ears. Like, don't call him an ear.
Hey, that's what the Quran says too. So I don't got anything more to go on than what it says.
What are your thoughts on this, Anthony?
Oh, the Quran is a jumbled, confused mess. I feel like I could argue different sides at different times, you know. So the fact is that it makes statements that very easily work in terms of Christianity. So the title word for Jesus is clearly a distinctive title. Even Muslims feel that there's a problem here, which is why they try to reinterpret this to mean that Jesus, when it says that he's Allah's word, it means that he was created by Allah's word be. That doesn't work, of course, because Allah created everything allegedly according to the Quran, and so everything would be a result of his word be, and so everything would be Allah's word. But Jesus is not just one person among many who rightly bears this title. He's the only one. And that's even clear. Not only does the Quran only use this term for Jesus, but in the Hadith literature, it's his distinctive title. When you look at the Hadith of intercession, it mentions all sorts of figures that people will seek out on the day of resurrection, hoping they can intercede for them with Allah. And each person has something special that singles them out. Like Adam, they're going to go to Adam and say, hey, intercede for us with Allah because you were made with Allah's two hands, right? That's Adam's special uniqueness. He was made with Allah's hands. But Adam's going to say, I'm a sinner, go to Noah, right? And Noah's going to basically say he's a sinner too, go to Abraham. Abraham's going to say, I'm a sinner, go to Moses. Moses is going to say, I'm a sinner, go to David. They're all going to say that, but each person has something special about him. Abraham is called the friend of God. And they're all stated in the Hadith, these special things. Moses is the man to whom God spoke directly. David was, man after God's own heart and so forth. So each person has something special that they think qualifies him to be a intercessor. What is it that singles Jesus out? That he's Allah's word. So this is a special title for Jesus. And the Quran, we know that it's picking Muhammad. It was mentioned he's the ear, right? He's picking these things up from Jews and Christians and pagans, and he doesn't explain where these things come from. That's one of the tip-offs, that he's getting it from somewhere, that people are already familiar with this. If it was a new idea that Muhammad's introducing with the Quran, then he would have to explain it. He'd have to define it. When he just uses a term, it assumes prior understanding on the part of people. So there are other people that hear this that understand that Jesus is called the Word. So who are these people? Be Christians. Where do we find this idea? In the Gospel of John. We also find it in the Jewish Targums. We find it in the Old Testament, where God's word is not merely a spoken utterance, but an actual person. So when you look at this sort of thing, you think, gosh, the Quran does look like it's affirming something about Jesus that goes well beyond him being nothing more than a man. But then you've got these statements that say he's nothing more than a man. Well, interestingly, some people have argued that even that doesn't show that Muhammad, or whoever authored the Quran, or whoever the authors were of the Quran, didn't believe in his deity. Some have argued that what you see in the Quran is a teaching known as Docetism. So Docetism is the idea that Jesus, the Word, only appeared to be flesh. He didn't really become flesh. Now, this can be a very sort. Nestorianism can kind of be described in this way. So some have said the Quran is Nestorian. Nestorianism is the idea that there are two persons in Jesus. There's the human, and there's the Word, the Spirit of Jesus. And so you can kind of see how this would work with Docetism, where the Word appears to be the human being that he's wedded to, if you will, but he's not really the human being. And anyway, my point is just to say there are people that have argued this different ways to try and account for the Quran calling him the Word and making all these superlative statements about him, but then turning around and saying, don't call the Word a human, or don't confuse the human with the man. When it denies the crucifixion, it seems to be affirming something like this, because it says it appeared to them as though he was dying. It's not necessarily the case that the Quran is denying that a human being died, even the one that was called Jesus. But what it is certainly denying is that the Word died. Right? Again, I'm just saying that there's different ways you could try and fit this stuff together, and it's really not our problem. I don't have to figure out what's going on here. All I got to do is put the ball in their lap and make them make sense out of it, right? And say, hey, looks to me like, Jesus is a divine person, but then it looks to me like he isn't. Is the Quran contradicting itself, or what's going on here?
Okay, thank you. Your brother in Christ and Al, is Allah the best wingman?
I'd say so. For Muhammad, I mean, he was quick to jump on any landmine Muhammad happened to stumble upon himself. I mean, if Muhammad made a promise not to sleep with his sex slaves, here comes Allah to save him from that promise, so he can instantly do it and break his promise to his wives. If he wanted the wife of his adopted son, oh, look, here comes Allah to give him the right to take his adopted son's wife. And then when people argue about it, Allah abolished all of adoption in Islam. Therefore, Muhammad is perfectly fine, as well as numerous others. Allah is very quick to include Muhammad in any sort of ruling, qualification to become true Muslim. You have to submit to the will of Allah. No, you have to submit to the will of Muhammad, as well as anything that Muhammad, forbids, that it also goes alongside there. Allah just signing off on everything Muhammad is doing. And do remember that, again, Muhammad's the only one that can hear these voices. So I totally believe him.
To add to that, Aisha seemed to be of this opinion as well. When we look at Sahih al-Bukhari 4788, we see narrated Aisha. I used to look down upon those ladies who had given themselves to Allah's messenger plural, and used to say, can a lady give herself to a man? But when Allah revealed You, O Muhammad, can postpone the turn of whom you will of them, your wives, and you may receive any of them whom you will. And there is no blame on you if you invite one of those whose turn you have set aside temporarily. 33:51, which would be the Quran passage. I said to the Prophet, I feel that your Lord hastens in fulfilling your wishes and desires.
In other words, any woman who's throwing himself at you, Muhammad, go ahead, have your way.
Well, and don't sleep with people who you promised to sleep with on certain days. Sleep with other people who you weren't sleeping with for days. It's all a mess. But Aisha was calling him out like, interesting that Allah is the reason behind all this, huh?
Convenient. Yes, he would qualify as a good wingman.
Okay.
Four wives for everyone else, but as many as he wants to. So there's that.
I guess that means, in a sense, we need to be sorry because our friend who is asking the question didn't die. She's been in hospital and she's survived. It looks like her fingers are moving, that she can still type questions there. Seems like the Dava gangsters are upping the takia. Jesus was a Muslim, Mary was a Muslim, and Greater Israel lie. Was Jesus Muslim? No.
Nope. There are so many references that show that Jesus is not a Muslim. Although they go to one that says that he fell upon his face and prayed to the Father. Well, if you look at how he told his followers to pray to God, well, that doesn't sound like a Muslim prayer now, does it? When it starts off with Our Father who art in heaven. The Quran's pretty clear.
So you are saying Jesus was a bad Muslim then?
He would be one of the worst Muslims ever. In fact, he would be, even by their own standards, believing that he was a Muslim who was sent to teach the law to the Israelites. By their standard, he's an absolute failure because there's not a single historical reference to a Muslim from the 1st century that was converted because of Jesus. He completely failed on his mission. According to the Muslims, he was an absolute failure. That doesn't seem very respectful to me. Just saying.
Also, why would the Jews kill him if his entire mission was to just proclaim the good news that there is one God? The Jews believed in one God. They were always monotheistic unless they abandoned Judaism. So that doesn't make sense.
Anthony Rogers, have you got any thoughts on quick answers like we can say to the Muslims when we are just outside of the mosque? We don't have that much time. We don't have 4 PhD. We are just going to tell them when they say Jesus was a Muslim, his mother was a Muslim, all that. What should we say to them?
No, he was not. No, so just to go along with what Eric said, the prayers of Jesus are full of Jesus making reference to his heavenly Father and identifying him as Father in a special way. He's not merely claiming to be a son of God in the sense that can be said of other people. According to the Bible, Old Testament and New Testament, creatures are sons of God, if at all, by adoption, by God's redeeming act. He redeems us and adopts us as his children. Christ was not a redeemed or adopted son. He's the Redeemer. He's the one in whom we have redemption, the one in whom we are accepted as sons. So when he speaks of God as his Father, he is identifying himself as the Son metaphysically, meaning his very nature as such is what his Father's nature is. They're one in nature or essence. So one text people can use for this is John 5:17 and 18, where Jesus, in response to the Jews complaining that he worked on the Sabbath, he said, "My Father has been working to this very day, and I too am working." The statement there is intended to say that even though it's the Sabbath and work is precluded, it doesn't exclude God continuing to do certain work. Otherwise, the world would cease to exist. God upholds the world and governs it. He's always working, and so am I. He's putting himself along with the Father as the one who's always actively involved in upholding and governing the world. And then the Jews want to kill him because he was not only in their minds breaking the Sabbath, but even calling God his own father, making himself equal with God.
Okay. What about Mary to be Muslim? I think this is because the way Mary covered up, so Muslim woman covers up that Mary is Muslim.
No. So, first of all, the Mary.
You heard that, didn't you?
No.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It doesn't say that in the Bible, obviously, but when Mary is mentioned, she's not mentioned very often. But you've got the birth announcement scenes. So in Luke 1, the angel Gabriel tells her that the child that's conceived in her womb is the Son of God. So if she believed the message from Gabriel, she wasn't a Muslim. And how can she be a Muslim without believing Gabriel? The Muslims are on the horns of a dilemma here. No, for that reason, if no other, she's not a Muslim. Matthew's account, they're told to name the child Jesus by the angel. Joseph is told to name him Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. There's a logical connective there. We miss it in English because we don't know that the Hebrew word, well, I know some of us do, but we can easily miss the connection because in Hebrew, the name of a person means something. The name for Jesus is Yeshua, which means Yahweh saves. So when the angel says to Joseph, name him Jesus or Yeshua, Yahweh saves, for he will save his people from their sins. He's telling them that this child is Yahweh. Right? He's to be named Yahweh saves because he will save his people from their sins. So how could she be a Muslim with that?
Thank you. Is this true? This new technology is apparently proving everything Islam is all perfectly true.
Well, to be honest with you, I just checked on YouTube and David Wood's actually covering that topic right now.
He's looking at this now?
Yep, the AI, whole AI Quran thing.
Yeah.
AI disproves Islam all the time, though. All the time.
Yeah,
Unless you order it not to. Then you can twist it.
Okay, so check David Wood's video. Is it video or live stream?
Live stream that he is.
Live stream. Check his live stream. Hopefully,
After it's over.
I didn't.
So, I'd say that we should put the emphasis here on AI, on the A, artificial. It's definitely artificial. It's not real intelligence. If it's saying the Quran is 100% from an otherworldly source, then it can't be. It can't be good.
All right, sorry, I do need to butt in on this one. Again, professionally, I am a computer programmer, so I kind of build software like AI. No. What you tell it to do is what it's going to do. It's no smarter than any of the programmers who put it in there. They are limited by their own bias, by their own information it is given by the programmer who made it. So we're not talking about true like artificial intelligence that's self-learning, self-growing. That's not what we're talking about. That's not what we have. It's limited by who wrote the code itself, and they have their own bias that they put into it, and that has been thoroughly proven.
Is AI like website or like an app?
Well, counts on which one, because there's some AIs that are apps, some AIs that are website based solely on the web itself. Again,
so I just like, if I want to search it, I just like go to Google and then write AI.
Yeah, ChatGPT is the most common one.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's made by OpenAI.
And it's very biased based upon, again, who programmed it, put their own bias into it. Okay. There are a lot of things that it will not do because it says, oh, well, that violates our terms of service. But if you just change one word, then they're perfectly fine doing it.
Okay. So they have different names. Which AI is the one kind of not put together by Vogue?
Not put together by what?
Vogue groups like this.
I don't know that I've. found one. There's one that's like claims to be Jesus, but I think that's even worse.
Yes.
The point.
That one's also, again, because it's a facade, but it's actually the programmer answering the questions.
Okay, so in
Again,
that
computers are very simple. They are Boolean logic, yes, no logic. If you tell it to do something, it will do that, but it won't be able to really interpret.
okay,
It doesn't have intuition. It doesn't have that sort of skill. It's just basic on off.
okay. I'm taking that as like if I have any questions about anything, I'll just turn the Bible.
Yes, that would be a safe.
Okay, Anthony Rogers, what was the highlights of 2024?
Oh,
I don't
well,
know if I asked you. I don't know if you replied. I do not remember. If I don't remember, probably you gave me PhD and I couldn't pick up from that. So, what are the highlights of 2024?
so first, there were some things that I was hoping would happen that didn't. Maybe that'll happen in 2025. One that I was really looking forward to is going to Nigeria and doing a couple of debates. I don't exactly know how that fell through, but somehow it did. But that was what I was really looking forward to that. As far as things that did happen, wow, there were several things. Of course, I went up and spoke at a conference with Eric and Elle, and I think I said something about Islam at the conference. I can't remember. I don't listen to myself when I talk, so I don't blame others if they don't either. But I know I addressed a bunch of stuff, and I probably said something about Islam. Oh, you were there. We did mock role playing and all that, right? We did. We had some mock debates and stuff like that. We did some training with people at it. So I guess I did say some stuff. Wasn't that this year?
No, that was this year.
I wasn't there for that day. I was sleeping.
Yeah. So
That was
I'm
horrible.
so bad even with years that I'm thinking when I saw you guys, it looked like you were like thinking I had my years wrong. But no, yeah. So I did that, and I spoke at some other conferences as well. And then, but one thing that was a highlight was going to London. Of course, Truth Defenders was there, and so was Dr. Dalcor. For me, I mean, there were all kinds of highlights about it. But one was, so, of course, Paul Williams. Paul Williams has been around for a long time, and he's been a Muslim and not a Muslim off and on for a long time in the years that I've known it. And they all seem to coincide with his desires to do something sinful. So anyways, putting that to the side, one of the things that I used to see was Paul Williams saying stuff, writing stuff on his blog, doing debates with people. Way back in the day, he was doing stuff with David and Nabil, and I always wanted to debate him. And right when it seemed like I was going to get an opportunity to do so, he stopped debating. He said he was done debating, and that's pretty common for a lot of these guys. Muslims don't last in the Dawa scene for very long. There might be a few. Shabir Ali's been around for a while, but look how much he's changed. He's become.
It's like almost Quran only.
Yeah, I mean,
Quran only, not even all Quran.
Yeah, it's not a comfortable spot to be in for Muslims because certain arguments only work for so long. If they work at all, it usually is the first time they spring it on somebody, and it's usually not because it's a good argument, but because it's so silly that people initially don't even know what to say to it. I mean, I've heard some arguments from out in left field and thought, that's not, I mean, I've never even thought something so dumb in my life that I would even have an answer to that. But anyways, Paul Williams, he has always taken liberal critical scholarship against the Bible and tried to use it, even though that same approach to the Islamic sources would make a mess of it. It's already a mess, but it would make things even worse. And I always wanted to debate him. And he also would do things on his blog where he would make up things, or he'd say things that I would show are wrong, and then he would hide the evidence that he did it. So I had to keep screenshotting everything he did. And so I really wanted to talk to Paul. when I went to London, I thought I had my chance, and somebody told me when we were at Speaker's Corner that Paul Williams was coming into the park. So David and I immediately started heading towards where he was coming from. And as we're getting, out towards the edge of the park, we're like, where is he? And people said, well, he heard that you guys were in there and he left. So Paul Williams officially left, and he even told people that's why he was leaving, because we were there. So Paul has no excuse. And I saw him at the corner, by the way, just the other day. I saw a video of him saying the same old nonsense. And I think, these guys only have the courage to do that with certain people that don't study their religion or what Muslims believe.
It's not like certain people who do not study their religion, certain people who never engage with Muslims in their life, they don't know anything about Islam, and the way Christianity makes sense for them is like they're quite happy with it. And it's been always intentional that Muslim missionaries actively would look for the newest people at Speaker's Corner. So I had it, like I used to do trainings. These are the first day Speaker's Corner questions. These people are going to come to you, and then here are the questions they are going to ask you. Here's the how to answer them. That's how they do it, because that video goes up and then it sells on YouTube. It helps them with from lots of ways. Therefore, they are intentional to ignore people who engage with Islam who spoke to Muslims before. So I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that he just freaked out. There are Christians are here who knows their scripture and they are famous. I cannot just tell my brothers, don't speak to them. That will look bad. Easier to just not be there at all. Probably they went home and then sit in front of YouTube and then watch the live streams. This is what happened. This is what happened. And then they will make videos about it. See, you should have not replied to this way stuff. So that's how it is.
Mm-hmm.
It just shows their religion is very, very strong. I believe he doesn't understand, coupled with knowledge and wisdom. Let's not use it for biblical purpose. I'll use the Bible. Go with Bible. Bible overrides all. What are you looking forward for 2025, Rogers? Anthony?
Some of the same. So speaking, besides my normal work and stuff like that at the prison stuff.
Will you go to Nigeria?
If the opportunity arises, it all depends on, I'm not the guy to plan any of this. I'm the guy that if somebody's planning things, I'll go do I'll get my hands dirty, but I'm not going to do a bunch of paperwork type stuff. I'm just not good at that sort of stuff. So somebody else has got to plan some of this stuff and work out dates and times and all that. So I'd be happy to go. I am going to be part of some conferences and some here, some elsewhere. That's what it's looking like. So I don't know the specifics on all of these things yet, but I know that Eric and Elle are organizing another conference for this year. So that's a tradition. I go up to that, and lots of other people go, and we search for evidence that other places can make good tacos besides the West Coast. It's not always a fruitful mission, but sometimes we do find them.
Everyone has a priority.
Yeah, no, but so yeah. I'm gonna be doing 2 debates with Shabir in April. These are his last 2 debates, he says.
When is it in April? Do you have the dates?
April 15th. It's a Monday at a university in North Carolina. So
what are the topics?
First is, did Paul?
It's Tuesday.
Huh?
April 15 is Tuesday.
Oh, well, then it's the Monday right before that.
Okay.
I'm going to be there for several days prior and after. So I just know it's the Monday because it's going to take place at a university. So these are going to be his last two. The first will be, did Paul continue the teachings of Jesus? The second will be, did Muhammad continue the teachings of Jesus?
Okay.
So
And why are these his last debates?
I imagine part of it is he's getting older and just, he's ready to wrap up some things. But he said his stated reason is that he wants to spend the rest of his life, I guess, writing stuff. So he wants to put out books. And I think, it's interesting. When you write stuff, it's easier for people to critique it, in the sense that, like, there's stuff on videos. If I wanted to go find out what Shabir said about certain topics, I could be hunting for hours and hours and hours to where he addresses it in some video. It's not that easy. And even if I heard him say it, I mean, I might not remember what video he said it in. I have people that contact me all the time saying, hey, where did you deal with this issue? And I don't remember where I dealt with it. They just know that they heard me say it in a live stream. Well, in print, you can go find this stuff very easily. And I think he strategically avoided doing a lot of that so that he couldn't easily, people can't easily quote. Even when you write an academic paper, it's not very, it might be changing a little bit, but it's not typically expected that you would use a YouTube link in a journal article to reference what somebody's saying. You're supposed to have some kind of written source. It doesn't look right having this big, long internet address. So I think he's been strategic in avoiding some of that. But now that he's getting older in years, he wants to leave some books behind him. And that'll be interesting because now we'll be able to take his books and refer to them and refute them. Oh, and he's, by the way, I forgot to mention, he's not only doing his last two debates with me, but he's also tentatively agreed to doing a couple of books with me, debate books.
Nice.
Yeah. So, and I love to write. So big fun.
Good. You can write, we can read. It will work well.
Yeah.
Al, your brother in Christ, what is it for you in 2025?
Can we start or you start?
You can start.
We've got quite a bit coming up. I know I got quite a bit myself, and you've got quite a bit coming up, hopefully on your channel coming up soon.
I've been posting.
She's been posting. Good. So I know that I'll be joining Truth Defenders on his new channel. First live stream scheduled for the 6th of January. So we'll be on there together. We don't have a topic. It'll be sometime that day. I'm not even specifically sure on the time, but we'll get there eventually. Don't hold your breath, but we'll get there eventually. I'll be going back to my normally weekly streams with midweek streams as well. And then we are hopefully going to have a store open up soon, an online store that people can purchase some apologetics merchandise through.
I'm gently forced to ask the question of, are you sure you are doing live stream with Truth Defenders on Monday?
That's what he told me, the 6th.
He also just said, wait, that's on my channel. Oh boy.
Yes, it's on your channel. We have meetings. We need to do meetings, but we will get there. I will drag you kicking and screaming, but we'll get there. And then you'll find out how easy it is and that you actually like doing it. And it'll be pretty simple.
And if you don't like doing it, then it doesn't matter because God still likes you using your voice for him. So it's okay.
I don't think encouraging is helping with him, sister. You just need to use different ways. But what about for you, Al?
I've got some interesting videos coming up. I interviewed several different apologists that are I guess, bigger names than the standard YouTubers that we typically interact with. Not that anyone is more important than others, but I'm hoping that it is able to reach different audiences than I typically run into. Talking about things about like why apologetics matters, how they like why they chose Christ, why they reject Islam, how to further ministries, and those sorts of things. And so hopefully that'll be coming out soon. I'm looking forward to the conference. I'm really hoping to also continue to get more involved with in-person ministries. God's provided lots of opportunities to share him in person with people this year. I'd definitely like to be able to continue to do that more next year. Yeah, I'm not super sure what's going to happen in the coming months, but definitely be praying for God's guidance. There's so many different opportunities that he's provided, so I guess a lot of it is just kind of figuring out, okay, God, what do you want me to specifically focus on? Sometimes it's kind of hard when doors seem closed, but at the same time it's a blessing. So may God continue to show, regardless of how he chooses to do so, what the priority should be. I'm just looking forward to seeing what his plans are, I guess, more than anything, because I know his plans are better than ours.
Yeah.
So here I am, Lord, use me.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to ask last question to Anthony. Can I, Anthony? It's not in the chat. So, yeah. I have a brother who is listening us. He sent a text message. So he is ex-Muslim, kind of become a Christian, let's say, I think it's been over a month now. He's got 4 wives. So he is asking your views from biblical perspective, that how he needs to handle his previous wives. His wives, actually. He doesn't say previous wives. What I need to do with my wives, he says.
Wow, that's quite the
Sorry,
conundrum.
sorry.
Yeah, so obviously from a biblical perspective, one man, one wife is how the Lord designed things. Instances in the Bible of people having more than one, or instances of people departing from the norm. Scripture doesn't always have to say this is a sin when it records something. This is the mistake. A lot of people mistake seeing the Bible mention somebody having more than one wife, and they think, well, therefore it's okay. Yeah, but the Bible mentions murders, mentions rapes, it mentions all sorts of things that happen in a fallen world. It doesn't always stop to say this is wrong. You get that from the normative sections of Scripture, like the law, or just straight precepts. Anyways, I don't think he has any question that the Bible is very clearly committed to, or commits us to, one man, one woman. It's interesting when you look at the gospel going forth into the world. It went into a world that didn't have Christian morality necessarily. And so we might be surprised at how the Bible handles some of these things. For example, the Bible doesn't just say abolish slavery. For example, it condemns certain forms of it outright. Man stealing is, for example, condemned in the Old Testament and in the New. You can't subjugate a person unlawfully. However, there were ways that people became slaves that weren't necessarily considered out of court. Like if a person committed a crime, he could be reduced to servitude, especially if it was an economic crime, you have to pay it back or something like that. If 2 tribes went to war against each other, intending to kill each other, the other tribe becomes the servants of so people could become servants for different reasons other than man stealing. And the apostles don't immediately say, give up, abolish all this. They rather address the proper way for masters to treat their servants and for servants to serve their masters. And they sort of subtly undermine the whole thing. they're not. How do I put it? They're not anarchists. They're not fighting against the government. That's not their approach. They're preaching the gospel, and they're undermining the immoral things in certain subtle ways. And one of the ways you really see Paul doing this is in Philemon, when there's a runaway slave. Remember, there's a runaway slave, and
I love the book.
Paul just subtly undermines the whole institution without just outright saying you can't have a slave. But he shows that the logic of the gospel works against having a slave. If the person reads it well, he realizes what Paul has done here is just sort of unravel this thing. But it's just more subtle. It's anyways. My point is to say,
I need to correct you. I think frying pan to the face would be more subtle.
yeah, I mean, he doesn't. It's subtle in the sense that he doesn't say, "Release your slave." Slavery is no longer lawful. It's just, he does it in a way that is more profound, I think. But I would say it's sort of similar in this case. Here's a person who the logic of the Bible is against it. But when the gospel was preached to these pagan contexts, you don't see the New Testament writers just saying, give up all your wives. I'm not saying that's not the case, that you should. I'm just saying that that's what it says is, for example, to the leaders, those who would be leaders of the church, it says they must be the husbands of only one wife. Because why? Because they're going to be a pattern to others. And so the first thing that they immediately do is they exclude from leadership in the church anybody who has more than one wife. That's, I think, a kind of subtlety. They're not being so subtle with those who would be leaders, but they're already showing everybody else, hey, this isn't right. But I think the reason I'm putting all this in this way is just because I don't want to say that a person can just automatically absolve obligations to people. These women that he's married to are probably dependent on him to some extent. And, divorce means, in a sense, there's no further obligation. But I think that the scriptures would suggest otherwise. I think there's, he's coming into the faith with some baggage that he'll have to, figure out how to wield. But I do think he has to, be only committed maritally to one woman, but he still has to work through how he handles things with the other women. I don't think he can just cut them off. And that's part of why I don't think the apostles just went in guns blazing saying, everybody get rid of your other wives, because some of these people would take it as the excuse they were looking for to stop fulfilling commitments. If you've got a woman that's dependent on a man, especially in certain cultures, where it's much harder for a woman to, provide for herself in some cultures. Our culture is much, further along the road of, progress and stuff where it's easier, but it's not so easy in some cultures. So, I don't know what his context is, but I think the short, simple answer is he has to be committed to one of his wives, and yet I don't think that justifies not providing to some extent, finding some way to make sure that this separation is not destructive of those other women, of their lives.
At the same time, you also have the question of, well, what if you have children with these other women? That would add in. He would still be obligated as a father. He'd still have those obligations to those children. There's no question in that.
So my general advice has been, first wife is the one you've got to keep. That will be in the eyes of God as your wife, and others you are responsible to look after them, provide for them, and for your children, unless and you live as brothers and sisters, unless woman approaches and then says, I want a divorce. Like legally, she can't do it because according to UK law, they are just girlfriends. But like if that kind of woman says, I want to go, then I kind of say, you've got responsibilities to fulfill. You've got to financially provide for them for a while until like things are being sorted out. In Ahmed's, in this brother's story, like first wife doesn't have children, so he wasn't happy with my advice. I think that's why he wanted to bring it to attention. But he's listening, so he will pray about it, he will reflect on it, and then we talk about it again. Okay, any last comments, any last thoughts before kind of we hang up the live stream? I think we got kind of, even though it didn't focus on laws and highlights of 2024, but I think like I learned quite a lot on what's happening in prison ministry, as well as what's happening in the world, and very much encouraged what Alan, your brother in Christ, is going to do as well. Not only what they have done this year, but they are going to do as well. And it's always the kind of just huge privilege to sit down and then hear Anthony's short answers to my short questions.
I'm gonna practice for the next couple of days giving short answers.
No, overall, like it's good to kind of unpack everything that people know, and then they can use it how they want to. You don't want to like just say no and then conversation finish there with the Muslim. So you need to know how to unpack that no. In that sense, it's good. I'm just like joking. So
yeah.
Sometimes you won't get that 1 hour answer, but
yeah. No, I sometimes I have to really get on myself, because if I go into a debate context, I'm not going to have that kind of time, right? So if I'm so used to giving long answers, it makes it hard to readjust, knowing that I've got 60 seconds to say what I'd normally take 10 minutes to say. So it's good.
Did the Mormon Church abolish the more than one wife thing? I didn't know they've done that.
Officially, to my understanding, they did.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's what they will say is, because the problem is their false prophet Joseph Smith called it an eternal ordinance. So they'll say that they can still be spiritually bound to multiple women who will be their wives on their planet when they get their hoped for planet, but they can't have a actual second wife here on Earth. Though the fundamentalist Mormons still follow Joseph Smith's old rule. But yeah, I mean, it creates problems, right? I mean, the first generation hearing the gospel will have some problems that, hopefully by the second generation aren't still lingering around. That's how it happens.
You need to have the ways to make sure that your children of their children forgets all the sinful things you are doing, so they don't copy.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think we stop here. We've been doing live stream 3 hours, 17 minutes, 13 seconds. That's very, very long time.
Good. I'm hungry.
I need my beauty.
Oh, all this taco talk has got me like, ooh.
We'll have to go get tacos after this. So there's that. Thank you, Anthony.
And
I don't have good taco options.
You don't have?
No, I mean, I'm a snob when it comes to tacos because I grew up on the West Coast, and that's why I was saying before. I mean, I've had some good tacos with Eric and Elle, even though it hasn't been on the West Coast, but they're not easy to find.
We're a lot closer to you than the West Coast, so I mean, if you just want to
just saying,
They're actually, so Truth Defenders and I, we left your area and within like an hour hit a good taco place. I don't remember where it was, but it was good. It was good.
My pick's still fuzzy tacos.
Yes.
I don't think I didn't have them. Remember, you guys were telling me about it, but we never
No, we
went
just
there.
did the happy tacos together, which were still pretty decent.
Happy?
Yes, the very happy tacos.
Those
But
happy tacos.
We did
Those
go to
happy
some
tacos.
truck. We did go to some. Were we in your neck of the woods when we did that?
No, that
No.
was vocabs.
No,
Oh.
no. I think he's
Okay,
talking about the North Carolina conference truck.
Oh, okay. See, I
Yeah,
can't remember. I don't remember what happens where. Everything blurs together. You know,
We got lots of tacos.
Yes,
one of
we
these
eat
days, I'm
tacos
going to tell
everywhere
a
we go.
story about Hatun and I in Arizona, and we've never been to Arizona at the same time, because they all just blur together for me.
That's dangerous.
So are you saying if you've been to one taco truck, you've been to all of them?
No, I'm saying that unfortunately, if I was going to create a religion, it would look kind of like Muhammad's religion, where I get people and events and names all mixed up in the wrong places at the wrong times, right? That's what it would look like.
But you remember when we were in Dearborn?
I remember some things, but
we went to this beautiful taco place. Do you remember that one? Like the place by itself was so beautiful. It was saying like something paradise or something.
That place, the Indian place. The Indian place was
sold tacos.
That
was
good
tacos.
Now I had curries there. I had curry there because, see, I told you I'm a taco snob. I assumed the tacos wouldn't be good. Elle told me they were, but I assumed they wouldn't be because it's not the West Coast and it's an Indian restaurant. So, and I love curry, so I had curry there.
I was actually gonna kind of come up with something in Dearborn, never happened, but I was just thinking, nothing came to my mind. And then I said taco, and then I remembered, oh, there was a place called Paradise something, and then sorry, it didn't work. It is very dangerous. Like I can just like say, oh, I did this with Anthony Rogers. People turn up to you, and then you just like, I don't remember.
You can only imagine what my wife would say if she were sitting in here. I forget stuff so quickly and so easily, and I'm surprised when I remember something. It's sort of like I get excited because it's like I don't normally remember that sort of thing. So.
Dangerous. Anyway, thank you very much, everyone who joined us in the chat, as well as thank you very much to my guest on the other side of StreamYard. By God's grace, we will see each other next year. Of course, God might be gracious to us. We might see each other at the bosom of the Father sooner than that. But wherever it is, until we see one another, may Christ crucified silently with his love. God bless you all.
God bless.